All right, everybody, I am back, and today we will be reviewing a discussion between Cliffe Knechtle and a student, I presume. They have a discussion. It looks like it's on a college campus. They are arguing for their respective positions in meta-ethics. It looks like Cliffe endorses some type of moral realism, and the other person endorses some type of relativism. I already watched about maybe a half or 2/3 of this, and I thought it was just a good candidate for something to review. All right. So for all the people that were here for the previous version of this, I guess you'll be coming back. All right, let's get started. And I'll pause at some point to talk to people in the chat, but I just want to get started in the video. Often I take a long time to get rolling on these things. So for people that want to start the video, just get right into it. I'm going to do that. Let's go. Okay, so check the volume. Looks good.
Man, it's been good talking with you. I can't thank you enough. You don't want to shake my hand? All right.
Because you're just a
quick response. I'm not a professional debater.
In this debate, an atheist student goes after Cliffe Knechtle's claims of morality and ethics. At the end, another atheist comes to calm the rising tensions. Make sure to stick around to hear each argument, then comment down below which one was the best. Now, let's get into the debate.
Basically, what y'all are saying is pretty much that without God, if you're an atheist, if you don't believe in God or any higher power, if you're not spiritual, then you have no ability to have morals.
No.
So this is a common thing that oh man, I'm starting off poorly. All right. This is a common thing that atheists will sometimes say when Christians say things like, morality requires God, or objective moral truth must be grounded in a higher power, that sort of thing, is they will interpret this, which is just a meta-ethical claim, as a claim that amounts to something like, if you don't believe in God, you are incapable of acting in accord with like the correct set of moral standards. Like you can't be a good person if you're an atheist, or at least if you're, not spiritual or something like that. That is very rarely what Christian apologists or Christians more generally are actually arguing for, or what they would actually say. I'm sure there's some that would maintain a position like that. But for whatever reason, people will interpret Christians, even when they're very clearly saying something like objective morality requires God, that they'll be interpreted as saying, if you're not a theist, you can't be a good person. That's a really weird interpretation, and I don't know why they did it. You can see he already is saying no, and you'll see he goes on to talk about how that's not what he's saying. And this is a point where this is a problem for atheists, and I guess you could say non-Christians or people that don't endorse the sort of realism requires theism sort of view, is for whatever reason, they consistently misinterpret this. I don't know why. It's really, really common.
We never said that once. We would never say that.
Not that you don't have an
Sir, I've been speaking for 40 years on campus. Okay, I've never said that once.
Don't jump on me.
Yes, I will. When you misquote me, I will reject it.
If you're going to jump first, we got to jump second.
Yeah, we will jump. You're jumping and we'll jump, okay? So please don't misquote me. I have never once said atheists cannot live good lives. I've said the opposite. I've said my atheist friends live good lives. They have an understanding of goodness. The question is, what is goodness? Who defines goodness? And if there is no God, the answer to that's real obvious. You define goodness, I define goodness, culture defines goodness.
Of course, that doesn't follow. So,
power really define goodness.
One moment. Why does this do this, where it stays highlighted? 1 second. I really hate how the text is highlighted up there. Ugh, I don't want it highlighted. That just aesthetically just bothers me so much. I can't handle it. All right, it's back.
I've said the opposite. I've said my atheist friend will jump. You're jumping and we'll jump, okay? So please don't misquote me. I have never once said atheists cannot live good lives. I've said the opposite. I've said my atheist friends live good lives. They have an understanding of goodness. The question is, what is goodness? Who defines goodness? And if there is no God, the answer to that's real obvious. You define goodness, I define goodness, culture defines goodness.
Yeah, so it's a really strange claim that theists will make. If it's not God, it's you. It's got to be you. It's got to be culture. Is it both? Is it you and culture? This just doesn't follow. Those are not the only options. Now, I will be the first person to say that I think there are literally no good arguments for non-naturalist moral realism. Naturalist moral realist accounts I'm not terribly fond of. I am the arch nemesis of moral realism. But it's just not true that if your moral standards are not grounded in God, therefore moral relativism or therefore moral anti-realism. That's just not an entailment. And, this is something that I would be really curious to ask Cliffe or other Christians more generally is there any scriptural basis for maintaining that Christianity entails or somehow is closely tied to some form of meta-ethical realism? If so, like, what's the scriptural basis? I've never seen any legitimate scriptural basis for that struck me as even remotely convincing. I don't know of anything about Christian doctrine that would require moral realism. I don't know why Christians, or at least Christian apologists, so many of them seem convinced realism and Christianity go hand in hand. Moral realism is this like weird philosophical view that philosophers came up with. Why would that have to be a part of Christianity? And why is this taken for granted? Like, they just seem to assume Christianity gives you realism for free. Why? What is this based on? I'd love to talk to somebody. I'm not saying it has to be baseless. I'm pretty confident it is, and that this is just not a feature of Christianity. But for those that disagree, I'd be happy to talk to them. They're welcome to come on the channel. So if you think Christianity entails realism, come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you.
The power elite define goodness, but it's all relative depending upon the individual, the culture, or the powerful people you're interacting with.
But that's how it is in general, all right.
No, those are the different options.
No.
The individual, the culture, the power elite, or God.
Each person has the ability.
So it could be non-natural moral facts that are not grounded in some kind of God. So you could have something like ethical intuitionism, some type of Platonistic account, some type of account that treats them as some sort of relatively deflated conceptual truths. They don't have to have fancy metaphysics. Those are possibilities for non-naturalists. You could have some type of naturalist realism. So I don't know where they get this idea that it's God or anti-realism. That's just so bizarre. There are all these realist views out there. I don't think any of them are even remotely compelling as positions, but the positions exist. So they, insofar as you think that there's at least a case to be made that they're logically possible, I'm not even saying that, but I don't see how someone would go straight from, like, even if I could argue on some grounds that all of these positions are internally contradictory, or there's severe problems with them, or they're incoherent, or they're unintelligible. Even if I reject it, it's not like he is motivated by that sort of position, right? I don't know what he's basing this notion that it's realism, it's theistic realism or anti-realism are the only possible positions available to people. Is there an argument for that? Is there an explanation for that? He's just asserting this. And one of the things I would hope would happen when students engage is not just try to push their own view, but to push, to question or challenge or push against the reasoning behind the sorts of claims that Cliffe, there's two, I know there's two of them. I don't know which one is which. To just challenge the presumptions behind their claims. I think a lot of people in these sort of public exchanges, if they're not familiar with them, if they're not used to them, it's a very tense situation, and it's hard to think on your feet unless you have a lot of practice doing so. And I think a lot of people get blindsided by people that are very assertive in the way that they engage. And I would hope that some students could start to learn, or whoever's engaging with them, to take a step back, to remain calm, and say, hold up. You're saying it's theistic realism or anti-realism. Why? What's the explanation for that? Because I don't think Cliffe is likely to say something very compelling when asked to do that.
To choose their own morals.
Yeah, obviously, we all choose.
Every government of any body of people has their ability to choose the morals that they're going to put into law over the people that...
Obviously, we agree on that.
So that already exists in real life.
Obviously, that exists in real life.
Has the ability.
So what on earth is your point?
Well, you're saying that to be able to, you're saying that we should all have some sort of communal like morals.
False.
Yeah, he did. I don't know the prior part of the conversation, but nothing that we've heard so far suggests that he thinks that. So it looks like the student, or again, I don't know who the person talking to him is. It looks like maybe they're not understanding his view. Maybe, I don't know, but it doesn't look like they're accurately representing his view. And at least he doesn't seem to think that they are.
Never said that once.
You're saying that we should get these morals derived from Scripture and from God.
False. Never said that.
Yeah. So did he say that? I would assume that he thinks that we have some sort of conscience, that the law of God is written on our hearts. That's not necessary to get morality directly from Scripture, and that people are capable of understanding or recognizing, what these objective moral truths are without necessarily having to read Scripture. Presumably, he thinks Scripture can help, but I don't know that he thinks it's necessary.
That once.
You just explain what you just said.
Thank you for asking.
Explain.
That is a good move on the other person's part, like to say, okay, I'm not getting you, explain. So that's a good move, and I'm glad that he said thank you. So far, it's there's tension here. He looks, the person talking right now looks worked up, but he got a handle on things, and it's like, all right, okay, fine. That's not what you think. Explain it. So that's a move in the right direction. I like to see that.
What I said was, if he says there is no mind prior to the human mind, no God, then it's obviously the human mind that creates and defines right and wrong.
Yeah, so that's weird, because he not only says if God's mind doesn't create the moral rules, then human minds have to create the moral rules. Why do we need minds to create moral rules? Why can't there just be moral rules? Like, I think it's a weird view, but why not consider that as a possibility?
Which means right and wrong are totally relative. They are a fantasy created in this handsome head.
So that's weird. Okay, so if they're relative, they're a fantasy? So are laws fantasies? Are the rules of games fantasies? Are taste preferences and music preferences fantasies? If something is a product of human social construction, that doesn't make it a fantasy. And this is another point where if someone is being careful when they're talking to him, they could say, hold up, do you think that, and this is why you give these sorts of examples. Do you think that if something is created by a human mind, that it's therefore a fantasy? What do you mean by fantasy? Is this an object? Like, he's using what you could call like sneer terms. He's using terms that are supposed to make the relativist view sound bad. Hey, the relativist view is a fantasy. But suppose fantasy just means something that's created and it's not like a natural part of the world. Okay. And what's the problem with that? So we've created money, we create houses, we create, like, there's lots of like literal senses in which you could create things like a house or a hammer or a phone. But there's also a sense in which we create institutions. We can create rules. I can create a contract. So like, here's an instance of something that is created by people. Marriage. Is marriage fake? Is it a fantasy that if people are married? I doubt that the apologists would want to say that. I think they would agree marriages are real. So things can be real and created by people. They're not fantasies, at least not in any sort of pejorative sense. I think it'd be really quite a stretch for him to say marriages are fantasies. And these are the sorts of analogies or comparisons that people should use when they are engaging with Christian apologists in this way, or with anybody that is making, I think, poor rhetorical moves to defend a realist view against an anti-realist view. Make the gastronomic analogy, make other sorts of comparisons or analogies to show that the way in which critics of relativist views are trying to undermine moral relativism, if we were to apply that same reasoning to other sorts of notions or ideas like food or social institutions, it really wouldn't sound very plausible. And that serves as a kind of reductio. It shows, yeah, this is not a good objection, because if you took it to its logical conclusions, it'd be a little absurd to object to other things on similar grounds.
A fantasy created in this handsome head. I am not right. He's not wrong. He's not right. I'm not wrong.
That's a funny thing. I'm not right. He's not wrong. So it depends precisely what he means by that. But on a relativist view, people can be right or wrong. Keep in mind, technically speaking, metaethical relativism is a cognitivist position. So it affirms that moral claims can be analyzed as true or false. So that is, in fact, what makes it distinct from non-cognitivism, in that non-cognitivism doesn't treat moral claims as true or false. So, there's that being an issue. And then the error theorist is a cognitivist, but they think all the statements are wrong. The relativist allows moral claims to both be true and to be false, depending on who's making them and whether it's true or false relative to that particular person's standards or their culture, however you're cashing out the type of relativism in question. But simply put, relativism does not hold that people never do anything that's right or wrong. So if you're a relative, I might, let's say I'm a relativist, I'm against stealing. If people steal, it's wrong relative to my values for them to steal. It's right for people to help people relative to my values. Okay. So someone might have a different set of values, but things can still be judged as right or wrong relative to those values. Comparing, like, it's very simple to make sports comparisons. Is it true that you're allowed to touch the ball in basketball with your hands? Yes. Is it true that you're allowed to touch it with your hands in soccer? Well, it depends. Are you the goalie? Are you throwing it, under conditions which you're allowed to throw the ball back in from being out of bounds? Then yes. Otherwise, no. So whether a rule is true or false, there's totally rules. Something can be right or wrong, true or false, relative to the rules of particular games. It'd be really weird to say that nothing is right or nothing is wrong, that no claims about what is or isn't consistent with a rule in a sport can be true or false because they're relative. Relativism does not entail that claims can't be true or false, or that actions in the case of morality can't be right or wrong. That just doesn't follow. It just doesn't follow. So a lot of times people will move directly from characterizing something as relativism to characterizing it as the view that nothing is right or wrong. Often I think there's a subtle equivocation, not really that subtle, where if you're a relativist, you don't think anything is stance independently right or wrong. And so if he said, if you're a relativist, you don't think anything is stance independently right or wrong, that would probably be true in most cases. Now, technically speaking, relativism as a view is consistent with thinking that moral facts are stance independent. But in most instances, any actual person committed to relativism probably also endorses some sort of stance dependent view. So while technically speaking, relativism doesn't entail even that there are no stance independent moral facts, in practice, it probably would. So even there, it's a bit of a stretch because, I'm not going to suggest that the apologists are making claims about logical entailments. They might be making claims about what's most plausibly true. Given one commitment, you're likely to hold this other commitment. That's fine. But there's still, if the claim is simply, hey, if you endorse a stance-dependent form of relativism according to which moral claims are made true or false by the standards of individuals, then it follows that there are no stance-independent moral facts about what's morally right or wrong. He could say that, and that'd be very precise. And that's probably what he means. But if you're not specific, you can give people a misleading impression about the commitments of relativism. You can give people the impression that if you're a relativist, you don't think anything is right or wrong, with respect to your normative moral standards? Well, that wouldn't be true. And then it would give the impression that if you're a relativist, you don't think it's wrong if another person like tortures a baby or something like that. Now, if you're an appraiser relativist who is against baby torture, you would think that that's wrong. And you wouldn't be obligated to respect or tolerate or be okay with people torturing babies. So it's very important to be clear about the type of rightness or wrongness you're talking about, the type of truth or falsity you're talking about. Is it index claims that are true or false relative to the standards of individuals or groups? Or do you mean true with respect to stance independent facts? In that case, maybe the relativist isn't going to endorse that. It's just really important to be precise, to be clear about precisely what you're talking about here, because if you're not, it will give them a very misleading impression about the implications of relativism. All right, so I've said a bit here, so let me pause for a moment to talk to people in the chat and see what's up. All righty, we got Zachman here. You get 1,000 lance loot. Sorry for the people that weren't here earlier. Or sorry for the people that were here earlier and then left and then came back because you didn't get the lance loot. I'm only counting it for this one. All right, so Zachman gets 1,000 lance loot. Mason gets 500 lance loot. There's that picture of Jupiter again. Mind Onion gets 250 lance loot. All right. Zachman says, how do intellectual people still make the moral argument? It's just so bad. Yeah, it's really bad. You get to pick your poison on why it's bad, either because you don't accept moral realism or because you don't really accept the conditional claim. So yeah, the moral argument's not good. I don't know that is he making them? I guess there's an implication that there's some kind of moral argument here. I don't know. No, I don't think so. Yeah, he's not making a moral argument here because he's just asserting the claim that moral realism requires God, but I don't know that he's making an argument for the existence of God based on the truth of moral realism and it being conditional on God existing. So yeah, I don't see a moral argument here. But yeah, moral arguments are bad. All right. So Zictomorph says his son Stuart is always the good cop. Oh, okay. So Stuart and Cliff. All right. I know I've seen them before and I just didn't remember their names, but I've definitely seen them and watched several videos with them. So Mind Onion says it's a series of rhetorical tricks these apologists don't engage honestly, in my opinion. Yeah, so I'm very reluctant to say that people aren't engaging honestly. So someone may be using what strike me as rhetorical tricks, and they may function for rhetorical purposes, whether or not a person intends for them to do so. So, I'm very reluctant to say that people aren't doing their best to engage sincerely, and I see no reason not to think that Cliff isn't sincere about what he's saying here. I would just say that he misunderstands relativism and possibly quite a few other things in metaethics. Not that he's not being honest. I would assume he's being honest. Jack Barry says, I feel like Christians raise interesting metaethical questions with the moral argument. They just give the worst answers. I don't know what those questions might be. Maybe they do. Oh, right. Yeah, this is probably from when I was asking about realism a little bit ago. The Underground says the whole metaphysical logos concept of God is where they get it from. I've debated many Catholics, and this is usually where the conversation ends up. Yeah, I just have to talk to some people that have specific theological views to see where they get them from. I would wonder whether they have a distinctively and recognizably scriptural basis for this, or whether this comes from some sort of doctrinal positions that are external to the Bible. That wouldn't invalidate them. I don't feel like, Christians, it has to be, unless you could quote it in the Bible, it's not part of Christianity. Some things have to be inferred. I'm fine with that. So Mind Onion says, the question that'll trip the apologist up here in my experience is, how does theism solve this problem and basically drive towards them citing God? Does it solve moral disagreement or give realism? I think that I suspect they wouldn't be fazed by that in practice. They're going to have some practice to answer about how God solves these problems if they're good at what they do. Yeah. Zictomor says, I like how he says, thank you for asking in the most combative way. It's like, thanks for asking. Thank you. You idiot. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that. But yeah, he's a little combative. He's a bit worked up here. I'm not seeing him as being aggressive in a bad way here. He's certainly animated and energetic. But I actually would like that if I were talking to somebody, that kind of like passionate, energetic feel. So far his Cliff's vibe doesn't bother me at all. I would find this to be a fun and enjoyable exchange. But I do think that the energy he's giving off here could be off-putting, intimidating, or make somebody anxious. And I do think it'd be nice if I don't know if he is or isn't self-aware about that, but I think talking to people in this context more calmly would probably be a little better. I would save the energy for somebody, like basically match energy levels. The person he's talking to looks anxious. They're struggling with their words at some points. I think if he toned down the emotional, like Cliff toned down the emotional vibe a bit, I think that would have made for a more productive discussion. So Jack Berry says divine command theory is still relativism. It's just contingent on God's opinion. Not really clear why this is supposed to be better than traditional relativism. So I'm not so sure about that. There might be very crude forms of divine command theory that say moral facts depend on God's standards. First of all, I wouldn't consider those relativism. Relativism treats the truth of moral claims as being indexed to different standards. It allows for truth conditions to vary. Technically, this would make, if this was the type of divine command theory in question, it would make it stance-dependent and a type of anti-realism, but not a relativist type of anti-realism. Richard Joyce cites someone, I don't remember their name, where they call these relation designating accounts. And these are kind of like, if you say all moral facts are facts about what my friend Steve thinks, I think Don Loma has examples like this. Well, then there's only one fact of the matter about whether something's right or wrong. It depends on whether Steve thinks it's right or wrong. So technically, on that view, it's not relativism, because moral claims wouldn't be true or false relative to different standards. There's one standard of truth. It's just, it all depends on what Steve thinks. So it's anti-realism, but it's not relativism. So stance dependence and the indexicalization of truth are technically orthogonal distinctions. So really, it wouldn't even be relativism. It'd be stance dependent anti-realism. But I've talked to people that know a bit more about how actual proponents of divine command theory flesh their positions out, and usually they have more components to them than a simple and crude moral facts express or are determined by the standards of God in some sort of recognizably stance-dependent way. There's more going on with these accounts, and usually they look and function more like some type of relativism. So it's really going to depend on the position. I'm sure you could say, like, you could always invent a position. You could say, hey, I believe moral facts are dependent on God's standards, and they're made true by his preferences. And they're just as arbitrary as human preference. You could identify that as a position, and then you could say, okay, and so therefore it's a type of stance-dependent anti-realist account. I don't know that arbitrariness would change things. So you could say, okay, they're not arbitrary, but they're still made true by God's preferences. Okay, still a type of anti-realism. But that doesn't mean actual proponents of divine command theory think that the matters are that simple. So as long as they say, no, that's not actually what divine command theory typically is or is thought of as being, I'm fine with that. Then they could potentially be types of realism. All right, I'll get to more comments. So let's play more of the video.
It's all relative. That is all we've been saying. Now, when you realize that, what you've got to say is, okay, I think it's wrong for him to stab him, but that's just my personal bias.
Yeah, see, that's a weird way of framing relativism, but that's my personal bias. So again, if you're a relativist, you would say that something like, let's say someone stabbing another person for like no good reason, like for fun or just on a whim. Okay, I think that's morally wrong. Now, does that express my personal bias? That's a weird way of characterizing a relativist view. I prefer vanilla ice cream over chocolate. Is that my personal bias? That makes it sound like it's a bad thing or something. Like, it's expressing my preference, my attitude, but why call it a bias? That makes it seem worse than it is. And like it's some type of, I don't know what he means by bias. It sounds like really pejorative language for characterizing the relativist view. And it looks like the pejorativeness, the negative connotations associated with the terms that he's using are what are doing the argumentative lifting here. In other words, saying, hey, if you endorse this position, I'm going to liken or equalize it or frame it in terms of or describe it using terms that are really, really negative or have negative connotations. So now those negative connotations carry over to the view. It's a kind of guilt by linguistic association. Hey, if I can use bad sounding words to technically describe your position, then your position is bad because I've used bad sounding words to describe it. That is what Cliffe is doing here. I'm very sorry, Cliffe. This is rhetoric. This is not a good or even a legitimate objection to relativism. It's just using bad sounding language to make relativism sound bad. It's not actually identifying any logical issues with it, practical issues with it, philosophical shortcomings. It's not showing it's counterintuitive. It's just making it sound bad by leveraging negative connotation. Not a good way of objecting to it. And he could do better than this.
If he chooses to say it's good to stab him, that's good for him.
Yeah.
No, wrong. It's horrible for him to stab him.
Yeah, but it's all relative.
No, it's not all relative.
Is it wrong for you? Do you believe that it's wrong for me to just stab him?
Yeah, but
yeah, so this is where things start getting a little chaotic. So like what the other person is saying, it's not clear. I mean,
Yeah, I
look
know.
at this.
No, wrong. I think it's wrong for him to stab him, but that's just my personal bias. If he chooses to say it's good to stab him, that's good for him.
That's good for him. What does that mean? Does he mean it's good relative to the standards of the person that thinks it's okay to stab the person? Well, if what we mean by it's good to stab the person just means or expresses the preferences or the attitudes of the person making the claim, then it would be trivially true that like relative to that person's standards, it would be good to stab the other person. Note though, that as an appraiser relativist, that it is good from that person's standpoint or relative to that person's standards doesn't mean that you have to think it's good. You'd only have to think that the statement, it is good for me to stab that person, is technically true when a person that thinks it's good to stab the person says that. But again, all that amounts to is that person thinks it's good to stab the other person. So like, so it's just saying something fairly trivial. Like it is consistent with the standards of a person that is okay with stabbing people to stab people. That's trivially true. So the relativist, as an appraiser relativist, you're giving an analysis of what moral claims mean. Again, I'm not endorsing appraiser relativism. I'm just saying what it amounts to are these sort of trivial descriptive claims that make sense of what people are saying in a way where the claims just turn out to be associations between the attitudes or preferences of speakers, like the claims they're making, and the actual, like, they turn out to be facts about the association between claims about what a person prefers and what that person prefers. And to the extent that they're consistent, the claims are true. To the extent that they're not, the claims are false. That's all appraiser relativism is really giving you. It doesn't carry these practical negative connotations. Agent relativism is a little weird. And if someone's criticizing that, then good for them, because I'm not on board with that. But when people are having these discussions, they often don't pull those two notions apart. They don't pull cultural and individual relativist positions apart. They don't pull relativism as a view about indexicalizing the truth of moral claims from stance dependence apart. So, the critique here is against presumably an anti-realist view. Why is he criticizing relativism? Relativism doesn't entail anti-realism. So why the focus on relativism? I mean, it looks like Cliffe is saying either you're a realist or you're a relativist. That doesn't even make any sense because they're orthogonal positions to one another. Realism is a view about stance independence of moral claims, and its logical contrast is the denial that there are stance independent moral facts. Relativism does not entail that there's no stance independent moral facts. So why is he contrasting with that? He should be contrasting with stance dependent accounts. And stance dependent accounts don't have to be relativism. They could be constructivist views. You have ideal observer theory. You have, I guess, maybe some crude forms of divine command theory. You have a variety of possible stance dependent accounts. Any relation designating account, for instance, is a stance dependent form of anti-realism. It's not relativism. So there is a lack of clarity in the conceptual distinctions being made here. And this leads to all sorts of sloppiness in this exchange.
Yeah, no, wrong. It's horrible for him to stab him.
Yeah.
See, as a relativist, if you're an appraiser relativist, you could say, I agree, it is horrible to stab him. Not a problem.
But it's all relative.
No, it's not all relative.
So what's meant when it's all relative? What does he mean? We don't know. And I wish that they would unpack this. Let's hear some more.
Is it wrong for you? Do you believe that it's wrong for me to just stab him?
Yeah, but what I
that's
believe
just
and what
his
you
relative
believe,
opinion.
It's everything's relative.
Exactly.
Like,
So
that's
if
a
you
relative
believe
statement.
everything's relative,
Yeah.
live it out. So if I stab him, don't tell me that I've done something objectively wrong.
See, he's being explicit, and that's fine. So he says, if you're an objectivist, and again, let's just interpret him as understanding relativism to be relativism in this specifically stance-dependent account. Even though relativism and stance dependence are technically orthogonal to one another, it's still reasonable to take relativists in practice to be endorsing stance-dependent views. So fine, all the relativism that we're going to be talking about here is presumptively stance-dependent. So then when he says, okay, so if you're a relativist, don't tell me it's objectively wrong to stab him. Then, if I were talking to him and say, fine, I won't tell you it's objectively wrong to stab him because it's not. And if he wants to start saying that that's a terrible, awful, no good, terrible, horrible view to have, I'll say, why? I think it's wrong. I just don't think it's objectively wrong. I don't think that adds anything to the wrongness to say it's objectively wrong. People will use this term objectively, like that makes it really wrong, or it's like used as a matter of emphasis, as if they think it's more wrong. Okay, well, if my pizza was objectively tasty, would it taste any different than if it's subjectively tasty? No. The wrongness of an action, from a relativist perspective versus an objectivist or realist perspective, that's a qualitative difference. It's not a quantitative one. So treating it's objectively wrong as a matter of emphasis, that doesn't fly. That doesn't work. That's not an entailment of it. If he wants to make a claim that the qualitative difference between relative wrongness and non-relative wrongness matters here, and I should say stance dependent, stance independent. The terminology here, unfortunately, is not being used consistently or clearly. If he's going to make that sort of claim, explain it, justify it. Why is it wrong? Why is something, if it stands independently wrong, why should I care more about that than if it stands dependently wrong? Why should I care more? I'd love to know.
Tell me, from your biased perspective, me stabbing him is wrong.
By the standards of our society.
Good. And so what if we live in white South Africa? What happens if
then the standards of that society are different than they are here?
Exactly, which means it's still all relative.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Which means don't get so upset about him stabbing him.
See, that's a weird thing. If you're a relativist, why would it follow that you can't get upset about somebody stabbing somebody? Again, let's just say we're relativists about food. Does that mean I shouldn't get upset if people are served terrible food, or if I'm served terrible food? Now, I mean, he's talking about how, other people. So this is a point to stop and draw attention to one of the differences between food preferences and moral standards or values, because sometimes people will say there's a big difference between them. And they'll point to the fact that food preferences only apply to yourself, moral standards apply to everybody else. Yes, that's a difference in the scope of the normative standards. It's a difference in who it applies to. There's nothing in principle that would stop you from having preferences about what other people eat. It'd be a little weird, but you could. So the difference there is just one of scope. There's nothing about being an anti-realist or being a relativist that would prevent you from having attitudes or preferences about how other people act. That is one difference between one's moral standards and one's taste preferences. But it's a difference in terms of who the standards are about or who they're for. I can have preferences about what I eat and not care what you eat. I can have moral standards about how I conduct myself and not care about how you conduct yourself. But in practice, food preferences are ordinarily applicable only to the self, and moral standards are frequently, if not almost always, applicable to others, often everybody else. That difference, though, that doesn't commit, like, that's not a problem as a relativist. So having attitudes about how other people act is completely consistent with being a relativist. And there's no reason why you couldn't be mad about how other people act on a relativist or any other sort of stance-dependent or anti-realist view in general. Just there's nothing that would stop you from not being upset about other people's attitudes. There might be one exception, which again is this weird relativism, agent relativism. So I've talked about this before. Agent relativism takes moral claims to be like whether they're true or false. They're fixed by the standards of I guess if the agent was making a claim. I don't even know if it makes sense to put it in terms of claims. Yeah, you could. I'm not going to get into that though. But okay, agent relativism treats moral claims as true or false according to the standards of the agent performing the action. So if an agent that's like a technical term that philosophers use. Agent doesn't actually mean like a secret agent or like a character in the Matrix or something. Agent just means something like any rational decision-making entity that meets certain sort of cognitive or intellectual capacities to be in a position to make decisions. So, maybe a puppy or a baby is not an agent, but an adult human being with their faculties intact is an agent. Okay, so agent relativism holds that if I think it's okay to do something, it is in fact okay for me to do it. But if someone else thinks that same action is wrong, then it's wrong for that agent to perform the action. And so each individual or individuals that are members of cultures, what's morally right or wrong for those individuals to do is sort of legislated or made true by their attitudes or the standards of their cultures. And that in fact makes it true that it's right or wrong for them in such a way that others thereby acquire an obligation to respect and acknowledge that. So on such a view, if someone else thought it was okay for them to steal, it would in fact be okay for them to steal in such a way that I should be responsive to that fact. So if I catch them stealing and they're like, no, it's okay. I think it's okay to steal. I go, oh, okay. So it is okay for you to steal, then that's fine. On that kind of view, and if you apply this at the individual or cultural level, it may actually not, you would be morally justified on such a view in saying that person's actions are wrong. They're not wrong. It's actually right for the person to steal or to do whatever terrible thing that they're doing because they think it is. Now, that's a weird type of relativism. I sometimes jokingly call this a la carte realism because the most objectionable feature about it is actually features that are similar in practical terms to realism. So it's not an actual form of realism because the moral facts are stance dependent on this view. They're made true by the standards of individuals or groups. So it is a stance dependent account. It is a type of anti-realism. But what's objectionable about this view? Well, what's objectionable about it is if there's a culture or an individual that thinks it's okay to torture people or do human sacrifice or whatever, it is in fact good for them to do so in a way that gives you an obligation. You're not allowed to intervene. You have to be okay with them doing it. You can't stop them from doing it. And so if that's the case, the most objectionable feature about this is that other people's attitudes and values impose standards or duties on you that are applicable to you independent of your own goals, standards, or values. And so now you're bound by these rules outside of your own. So if you think, hey, my standards are good standards, I'm against torture, I'm against these bad things. This could be inverted. It could be that we were all pro-torture in this conversation. But presuming most of my audience is anti-torture, I'm anti-torture. So presuming that's the case, now you have this problem where if someone else is torturing, what am I supposed to do on this view? Oh, well, I guess it's okay for them to torture. So that actually creates an obligation for me independent of my own goals or values, just like realism. So, the problem with these sorts of views is that they actually put constraints on us that are on normative grounds really, really objectionable. And this agent relativism, technically a meta-ethical view, but it carries straightforward, direct, practical implications for our actions. It tells us what's right or wrong in a way that's allegedly binding on us, that is authoritative for us, and that tells us what we should or shouldn't do. And then you point out on such a view, people would have really heinous attitudes, and you would have to be okay with that. On such a view, at least you'd have to be morally okay with it. Fine, let's object to that agent relativism. I don't like that view. I don't want to endorse that view. But notice that what's objectionable about it are its normative features, not its meta-ethical ones. The meta-ethical ones lead to these objectionable normative features. So this is a view that, properly speaking, isn't even purely a meta-ethical view. It has these practical normative implications and those are the thing that are objectionable about it. So when critics are criticizing relativism, why is that what they focus on? And this brings us to a much bigger problem with Cliffe's critique. It seems like he's saying you have two options: theistic realism or agent relativism. So if you don't think moral truth is grounded in God, you have to endorse a view according to which, if someone thinks it's okay to run around stabbing people, it is in fact morally good for that person to run around stabbing people. I don't have to think that. That's not the only option available to me. This is a very weird claim. Agent relativism is a ridiculous position, and I find it to be ridiculous for many of the same reasons I find realism to be ridiculous. I'm not going to endorse a view that says there's facts about what I should do that are true independent of my goal standards or values. Why would I conform to rules that I don't care about? It has exactly the kind of weird motivational or lack of motivational qualities that realist views have. So let's say I don't want someone to steal from me, but I'm an agent relativist and they want to steal from me. And so therefore it's morally good for them to steal from me. Why should I give a shit if it's morally good for them to steal from me? I guess I don't care about morality then. Tough shit. You're not stealing from me. So it has the same problem where, it has this weird quality of saying that you ought to do this independent of whether you want to. That for me, this is another reason I call it a la carte realism, has exactly these weird, objectionable, conceptually very bizarre notions about normativity that don't connect to motivation. I mean, if it is supposed to connect to motivation, that's also weird. Okay, demonstrate that. I don't think it does, though. So a lot of realists have just become motivational externalists and are just like, nah, moral facts, they don't have to actually motivate. Okay, yeah, and these don't, as far as I can tell, don't motivate me. Even of course, these are hypothetical. If there were these facts and if I did believe in them, would I be thereby motivated? I don't know. I don't think I would. And if I'm right about that, then they're not motivating. Of course, I don't care that much about these thought experiments or like trying to imagine counterfactual things. What would I think if I thought these other things? I don't know. But why would anyone care about following rules that are fundamentally at odds with what they care about, what their values are? I don't. Why would you? I wouldn't. I don't think. In fact, I would say I hope not. So if moral realism is true, I think I would ignore it, and I sure as hell hope that I would ignore it. And if I could push a button right now to say, to hell with moral realism, I would never comply with its rules, I would happily push that button. I want to act in accord with my values. If moral realism was true, either the moral facts it would say are the correct moral facts would just happen to be consistent with my current moral standards, in which case, fine. But then I'm not conforming with them because they're morally right or wrong. I'm conforming with them because I would have anyway. And if they're inconsistent, okay, so what inconsistent how? What are they going to be? If the moral facts are stuff like, you got to go torture people on Tuesdays. No, thank you. I'm not going to do that. They could be less egregious than that. They could be arbitrary or weird. It could be, the example I've given before, screaming at tables. I'm not interested in screaming at tables. No, thank you. But even if it's stuff like you should donate exactly 19% of your money to a particular charity, say a charity that helps hummingbirds. I don't know. No, that's it. That's a nice thing to do. I don't specifically want to do that though. So no, thank you. I'll go do something else. So I don't particularly care what the objective moral facts are. I'm not interested. And now sometimes proponents of realism will tie objectivity to or stance independence or realism, this is stupid terminology, to rationality. Okay, then I'm not interested in being rational. If rationality is, if it's rational to do things that are against my interests and undermine achieving my goals, I have zero interest in that kind of rationality. I want to achieve my goals. That's what I want to do. What about you and the audience? So let's stop and I'll have a look at what the audience says again. People talking to each other. Nitty says this will get subs. Tag Cliff's channel for the algorithm, bud. Yeah, good idea. In fact, I could probably do that now, right? I could actually open up the video and tag him now. Maybe it'll even get people coming over here. Let me do that. Give me one moment. And I'll tag him right now. 1 second. What is the name of the channel? Bible Alive. Is that the name of the channel? I'm going to double check real quick if that's the correct channel, unless somebody in the chat confirms that it is. Yep, sure looks like it. Okay. All right, so now they are tagged in the video. So we'll see if, I don't know how many, it looks like they get a lot of views. How many views? 120,000 views. So maybe some people from over there will start coming over here and we could have a discussion. I would love for people that, especially people that disagree with me, to have a talk. And I'll do my best to be civil. All right.
Because it's just relatively wrong. It's not objectively wrong. It's just relatively wrong. So chill.
Oh my God. Just relatively wrong. So chill. Something being relatively wrong doesn't mean it doesn't matter, and it doesn't entail that you should chill.
And let him stab him. No, you can say it's wrong, but obviously he says it's right.
But it's still relative.
Yeah, exactly. According from your view.
Believes. So you're saying that the only reason that we believe that it's a general consensus that someone stabbing someone else is evil is because those are morals that we got from God?
Because morality is relative. For him to stab him, objectively, nothing wrong. But if he has been created with value, because there's a God who made him for a purpose, then it is evil for him to murder him. It's that simple.
Evil is relative. Evil is
it's
a matter
not.
of opinion.
When is the abuse of an innocent child ever good?
See, that's normative entanglement right there. When is it ever good? Well, do you mean stance independently good, or do you mean stance dependently good? Because I would think the abuse of children is never stance dependently good. Like, I never consider it good. So yeah, it's always bad, but that doesn't require realism. It just doesn't require it. So for comparison, when is a shit sandwich ever tasty? Never. Now, if you say, but what about the fly people from planet, Flyos that actually eat feces? Okay, fine. Then they might find it delicious, but I don't, and there's no poop sandwich I'm going to enjoy. So that there's this conflation between universality or like whether something or absolutism. So whether there are ever exceptions to something being right or wrong, that'd be absolutism. Whether the moral rule applies to some people but not others, that would be universalism versus some sort of like non-universal. I don't even know what the term for that would be. Localism, I don't know. So there's these other distinctions. Some of them might be meta-ethical distinctions other than stance dependence versus independence. Some of them might be distinctions that actually go into the realm of normative ethics or other sorts of distinctions. They're not meta-ethical distinctions. The point here is that often distinctions other than the dependent stance independence divide are conflated with that divide and applied in these situations as if they're relevant when they're frequently not relevant. Cloud of Time, by the way, everyone gets their last name incorrect. It's pronounced Knechtle. This was confirmed by on Alex O'Connor's channel recently. Was it? Okay, I'll have to go check that out. And if that's correct, then I can start pronouncing their names correctly. All right. Let's try to get through the chat so I can stay caught up, and then I'll continue with the video. This is funny. My opinion. Sometimes I flip the tables and respond, wait, so you don't think it's objectively wrong to do a bad thing? Yeah. So it's not against your preferences to torture babies or whatever it would be. Of course, they'd say, yeah, it's great. So what do we need more for? I agree it's bad. You agree it's bad. What do we need the objective moral facts for? Like, either the objective moral facts agree with us, in which case, great. But what if they didn't? Would you then be okay with torturing babies? Yeah, so you can flip this on realists, and I wish more people would make that move. So thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, but I don't like to do that because that also seems a little rhetorical. But if they're doing it, you could do it back, and then if you could make the rhetorical point like, "Hey, I could fight fire with fire." You could do that if you want, and yeah, I think it would be effective. So I'm not really that against doing it. Oh, right. And Yenzi says, as an anti-realist with realist phenomenology, I find Lance's framing of morality quite odd. Morality really seems like something outside of myself, and it's only philosophical reflection that I include it isn't. But it seems Lance totally lacks realist phenomenology entirely. I do, and I think most people lack realist phenomenology. I see very little evidence in the empirical literature to suggest that most people have realist phenomenology. I'm not even convinced most people have, well, maybe most people do. I don't even think that moral concepts, like the concept of morality, is universal. I don't think all societies all through history, or even perhaps today, even have a distinctive concept of morality in the first place. I don't know if those societies could or do think anything is morally wrong, much less that they think it's stance independently morally wrong. So whether or not and to what extent anybody has this phenomenology is, of course, an empirical question, but I'm not going to operate on the presumption that everybody thinks like me. So I lack realist phenomenology, but I also don't take myself to speak, think, or act like a realist. I don't think, but that I also do speak, think, and act like an anti-realist. I don't think most people are anti-realists either. I think most people don't really have any distinctive intuitions, phenomenology, or experiences, or anything like that that would reliably incline those people towards realism or anti-realism. And insofar as people do, I would take that to be historically contingent. So of course it's possible, like, let's say all the moral realists had a bunch of babies and then everybody else died. Maybe most people would have realist phenomenology, but the same might be true if a bunch of anti-realists had all the babies and everybody else died. Then it might very well be the case, like, or at least me, let's say, well, me and everybody that agrees with me, we're the only people that survive. Like, we're all at a anti-realists, no realist phenomenology conference, and there's a big apocalypse and we happen to survive for whatever reason. Okay, well, maybe our offspring would all not have realist phenomenology. So a lot of this might just be contingent on facts about human psychology and the particular culture that happens to prevail in the world. I don't take this to be some sort of like innate feature of human psychology or innate feature of agency that one would detect moral facts or have realist phenomenology. I mean, could be true. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying this is an empirical question. And often what I find is that realists are rather super confident that their way of thinking is the norm without really providing much in the way of evidence for that. So when you say it's odd, is it? Maybe you're the odd one. So it could be you're odd, could be I'm odd, could be we're both odd. And it could be that most people think in a way that's different from both of us. I don't know who's odd here. So Yenzi goes on to say, not saying it's wrong, it just seems odd to me. I guess I share the same sort of incredulity towards anti-realists that realists do, even though I am one. See, that's the thing. I'm not incredulous that people report having realist phenomenology, or they report that they could hear God, or they can report. Why are people so incredulous? So, I'm not just a qualia quietist. I don't even know what it would be like to have qualia intuitions. I think the idea, like Nagel's idea of like, what's it like to be a bat? I think it's complete nonsense. I think it's totally inconceivable, completely ridiculous. I don't recall ever having qualia intuitions. I remember in grad school, people were so flabbergasted by this. I was put in the hot seat. People challenged me and say, "How could you?" They'd like try to ascend and try to get me to have this sense of that we have qualia. Never worked. It's just never been the way that I think. So, am I the idiosyncratic weird one? Maybe. One doesn't make me wrong. Maybe a bunch of other people, like maybe there's something going on with them that they're all wrong for some reason. If 50 people are duped by a mirage, and I have some for some reason I'm not, they could be the wrong ones, not me. I'm not saying they are. I'm not saying they aren't. Well, I do think they're wrong, but I don't think the mere fact that I seem to be having the non-standard intuition or phenomenology among analytic philosophers or among people that typically talk about the topic, therefore entails that I'm necessarily idiosyncratic with respect to human psychology more generally, or that there's something wrong with my psychology rather than there being something wrong with theirs. So I don't know what's prompting the incredulity. I'm totally fine with the idea of cognitive diversity. So, one possibility is they think that way and I think my way, and we both are actually correctly describing our own experiences. That's a possibility. I don't actually think that's true, but it's a possibility. But I'm puzzled at the incredulity. Some people have, aphantasia. They don't have mental imagery. Some people don't have internal monologues. Different people think differently, and I see no reason to think that to just be blown away that it's interesting. It's surprising. Wow, people don't have mental imagery. That's fascinating. But I'm not inclined to go, well, I have mental imagery, so they must have mental imagery. And it's just, I'm incredulous. I'm not incredulous. People are different. All right, I'm continuing through the comments. All right. Yeah, so Mind Onion says, yeah, I never started, but if they start the rhetoric, I just give up on the conversation being honest. I'm jaded that way. Yeah, I just don't think rhetoric necessarily makes you dishonest. Spirit Animal Doggy says, thoughts on Schaefer Landau, non-naturalistic realism. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where Schaefer Landau has a lot of specific things to say. And so if I wanted to address it, I'd want to sit down and go through his book or go through some of his more recent articles. I have been reading Bingson's, has a series of articles on intuitions and their role in moral realism. He has something about the trustworthiness of our intuitions and a few other things about the role in morality and just more generally the role in philosophy. So I'm going through some of those articles. There's 3 or 4 of them. Bingson has co-authored some work with Russ Schaefer Landau and Terence Cuneo. And so I'm going to read their articles first. They wrote several articles leading up to the recent book publications. So I'd like to get through the articles first. Usually I prefer those over books. Books are wordy and I often find them deeply boring. So I got to get through the articles first. Yeah. So, and Yinzi just says, yeah, I mean, it's odd to me. No, fine. Of course it could be odd to you. I think the realists, we're just talking about ourselves, realists seem odd to me. I think it's so bizarre. Like, speaking for myself, it seems or feels to me really bizarre to like consider moral things and go, it's wrong no matter what anyone says or independent of anybody's goals or values, and to report like experiencing the world that way. What are you experiencing? That just strikes me as profoundly strange. How could you experience like a philosophical position? How does that even happen? I don't experience my philosophical views, and I don't experience the world. Like, I'm not presented with intellectual percepts of that accord with my views. I have my views. I have percepts and I have views, but the views aren't percepts. I don't even have intellectual seemings at all, and I don't think those are genuine psychological phenomena. I think people reporting those are just reporting what they think or what they believe or what they're disposed to believe or what they feel might be the case. I don't even know what exactly that would amount to, but I think that they're reporting mundane psychology. I don't think they have special faculties I don't have. Theology scholar says, would you say that asking a question about someone's morality or ethics presupposes empathy by taking an interest in their moral interests? No, you can ask a question and just be a completely manipulative jerk that's just trying to mess with the person. So I don't think asking a question says anything about the motives for why you would ask the question. Akil says, LOL, you've been streaming for an hour and you're 4 minutes through the video. So this is a thing about my streaming. So when I stream to do a review video, the video is a context for me to talk to my audience and talk about what I think about stuff. And there actually is a lot of content in the first 4 minutes, but I'm also interacting with the audience, reading comments, responding to questions. So there's a lot more that goes on. And I go back and forth between the video and interacting with the audience. So if I only get through 10 minutes of the video, that's fine. It would be really weird if all I did was just sit here and watch a video while you all watched me watch a video. I want to talk to you.
I'm saying we believe it's bad as a society, but an individual could still believe.
I could give a rip In some societies, they think it's just fine to eat your babies. I think that society is wrong.
Just as an aside, see, this is why I can't get through 5 minutes of things. What societies think it's okay to eat your baby? Is that a real thing?
I don't care what the culture says. It's wrong to eat your baby. Don't do it. Objectively wrong. I am convinced Dr. Martin Luther King was absolutely correct when he wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail that said, you know, I really don't care what the great state of Alabama says. There's a law above the law of the great state of Alabama, and according to that law, segregation is evil. The only way he can say that is because he knows there's a God who creates all human beings in his image with equal value. Therefore, for you to denigrate somebody and have a racist attitude is not relatively wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Does that make sense?
So he's just stating his position. He's not presenting an argument for it. A person can think, Martin Luther King is absolutely in the right. And by absolutely, I mean there as a matter of emphasis, without having to think that he is pointing to or gesturing at stance-independent facts that necessarily require God. Like that is just not a requirement for holding a moral stance, any particular moral stance. And what he's doing, it seems, is, again, this looks like rhetoric. It looks like he's giving the impression, look, either you agree with me or you disagree with Martin Luther King's normative moral values. Those are your only options. And those are not your only options.
But that doesn't prove anything.
Doesn't prove anything. You're right. It's just calling you to be intellectually consistent. That's all.
So he hasn't pointed out any intellectual consistency in the person he's talking to's views. He's just asserting his position. Now, to be fair, the person neither person has actually made arguments. They're just stating their views over and over. I mean, they're 5 minutes in. Nobody's making arguments. Where are the arguments?
No. So if you're going to tell me morality is relative, then don't tell me that abusing innocent children is wrong.
See, that's so weird. Okay, if you're a subjectivist about food, then don't tell me eating a pile of rotting garbage is gross. Wait, that doesn't follow. You can say, yeah, I'm a relativist, and it's wrong relative to my values. What is he talking about? He seems to think you can't say things are wrong if you're a relativist. Why couldn't you? Relativism is not the view that you can't say anything is wrong. That's not the position.
Don't tell me that racism is wrong.
But you're misquoting me. Because I'm
not quoting you. I said don't say.
That's fair. You're misquoting me. I'm not quoting you. That's fair. That's good.
I haven't said it yet.
I'm saying don't say, and then whatever.
Don't think, okay? I'm not quoting you, okay?
So what you're saying is, if each individual person has their own ability to choose their morals.
Yes.
Each individual person can do that.
Yeah.
So it's all relative. So if we as a society believe that this thing is inherently wrong, if we as a society believe school shootings inherently wrong, racism inherently wrong, that's our beliefs as a society.
That's a little weird. If we believe it's inherently wrong. What does he mean by inherently?
That could be completely different than the beliefs of a society somewhere else in the world or of a society from the.
So see, it sounds like he's giving a descriptive account. Hey, if we in our society believe this is wrong, that could be different than the beliefs of another society that don't believe it's wrong. Yeah. So we in our society, we believe X is wrong. That other society, they believe X is not wrong. What does that have to do with whether it's right or wrong? If you're relativist, you might think it's right or wrong relative to our society. And it's right or wrong relative to that society. But he's not saying that. He's not being clear about whether he's describing a descriptive view. Hey, these are facts about what people believe is right or wrong. Or if he's describing some meta-ethical stance about what it is that makes the claims made by people in our culture or that culture true or false. And this distinction needs to be made. So, it's just for whatever reason, people conflate when it comes to relativism, meta-ethical relativism, which is a position on what it is that makes moral claims true. Descriptive relativism is not actually relativism, which is the empirical observation that different people have different fundamental moral values. And normative relativism, the view that it's morally wrong to interfere in or override the moral standards of other people or cultures. Like you ought to respect other people's moral values. Those are just different positions. One's meta-ethical, one's normative, and one's descriptive or empirical. And they're just different claims. It looks like people that talk about relativism, it's all three, or it's two of them, or it's the first one and the third one, and the first one and the second one, and the second one and the third one. They don't keep these things separate. This lack of clean conceptual separation really causes just an absolute nightmare for all of these discussions.
In the past,
Is our
But-
society right and that other society that disagrees with us wrong?
it's all
Is he asking a normative question or a metaethical question? Because if you're a relativist, you could say, yeah, the other society's wrong. That's what you should say as a relativist. You know, relativism doesn't mean you don't get to have normative moral standards. All right, let's get caught up on the chat. So, and Yinzi says they confuse relativism with moral nihilism. I agree. They think, so and Yinzi continues, they think relativism means nothing is right or wrong because they think the only way something can be wrong is if God or whatever commands it so, as if human judgment has no genuine worth. Right, but that's what they should argue for and not just assert over and over and over, because he's just asserting. Cliffe has not made a single argument. And I'm not sure if he will make any arguments. Yeah, Akil says you could translate, quote, objective to thumping your fist on a desk without loss of meaning. In a lot of instances, I think that that's true. Yeah, and Yenzi says objective means super duper, really, really genuinely real stomps foot. Yeah, that's a lot of times it has that vibe to me. Now, you know, a moral philosopher will object to that, and that's fine, because they could, in a very dry tone, say, I think it stands independently wrong. And they're not stomping their foot. But sometimes they crank up the rhetoric.
Oh, I mean, it
Relative,
just depends
come on.
on. Yeah,
It's all relative.
It depends on the
So
society.
don't tell me there's any objective good or objective evil. It's all
yeah,
relative.
I never said that there was objective good or objective
okay.
evil. There's
Then
not.
don't get so upset
society can
about
be
evil.
Again, with that, being a relativist doesn't mean you can't get upset with evil. I made the point enough times, though.
Because evil is not objectively wrong, it's relatively wrong.
And you wouldn't go to India and those kids whose parents are breaking their bones, so they put them out on the side of the street so people can give the family money. You wouldn't dare, as an American, go down there and tell them that that's wrong, would you?
Because that's their culture.
And that's ethnocentric of you to do so. I hope you wouldn't do that, because that would be very inconsistent by what you are saying right now, not him misquoting.
The definition of ethnocentric is only from the standards of one's own society.
So you wouldn't do it.
Just because I'm telling them that it's wrong, I'm not saying you need to believe that this is wrong, because my society says you should believe that this is wrong. Saying I believe this is wrong,
and
that's
I don't
not saying
believe
it's
that you really
objectively
believe
wrong.
that. I do not believe that you really believe that.
Ooh, that I think people here, you may know that gets my blood boiling when someone tells me I don't believe what I say. Oof. Oh, that makes me angry. I don't go around saying stuff I don't believe. I mean, there might be contexts where I would, you know, so I don't know, I'm waylaid somewhere. And if I say the wrong thing that people are going to kill me, then I might say, oh yeah, I wasn't there at all. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm not saying I'm not willing to do that. But when I'm having a philosophical discussion and someone just goes, they don't like what I have to say, some anti-realist position or whatever. And they're like, you don't believe what you're saying. Oh, so you have mind reading powers? Yeah. It's not a cool move to make.
I don't think if you went down to help that poor child, that his parents did that to him, that you would come back here and be like, oh shoot, that was just my own cultural American morality again. And I cannot tell them that was really wrong. I think you would be pretty dejected and feel pretty bad about yourself.
But
you use oughts and shoulds every day, I'm sure.
What is this? You use oughts and shoulds every day. What do you say? I'm sure. Is the idea that if you're not a moral realist, and specifically a theistic realist, that you wouldn't use ought language and should language? So that's a kind of deontic language of like shoulds and shouldn'ts. There's also the evaluative language, like good and bad. Imagine saying it to a person. Again, I'm going to keep using these analogies because they're good analogies. Imagine, you know, someone's taking a bite at a pizza and you slap it out of their hand. And you're like, hey, you can't say that food is good or bad unless you're a realist about it. In fact, the wonders of taste have to come from God. And if you don't believe that, you cannot say that pizza is good or bad. People just go around all day long saying pizza is good and And the pizza that way, people that write Yelp reviews, they say the pizza here is good and the pizza there is bad. Well, they must think God provided tastiness to us and the intrinsic tastiness. God added tastiness to our food, made mushrooms delicious or whatever. And if you disagree, you're mistaken. You got to think that, or you have no business saying that pizza can be good or bad. That's obviously absurd. Not too many things I say I think are obvious. That's obviously absurd. So evaluative claims and also claims about what you should or shouldn't do can and simply are consistent with thinking in intersubjective terms, with being some type of relativist, being some type of non-cognitivist. It does not require a presumption of realism to make claims about what you should or shouldn't do or about what's good or bad. And they seem to be presuming that if you use normative language, you have to be a realist about it. No, because we use normative language in all sorts of domains. We're going to be realists in all those domains. What's special about morality that normative language in the moral domain has to be realist? Really weird.
Hey, Mom, you ought to have given me money for lunch today. Hey, brother, you should not have hit me today and pummeled me again. What are you appealing to when you say ought and should?
Y'all see how he's trying to make.
So I don't. What's his name? Stewart. I don't like the way that he's talking to this person. It's loud. It's abrasive. I don't see how that's supposed to be an appealing way to engage with people. I would find that pretty frustrating for someone to talk to me that way. And I don't know that if that's their intention, but they really seem very worked up here. Okay, theology scholar. Another round with this question. Maybe I didn't understand it before. If you ask about someone's morality and care about their interests, you affirm empathy. If you don't care, does it not admit some measure of intellectual dishonesty in the discussion? It might, yeah. I mean, in a lot of cases, like, you know, if you're asking about someone about their views and you don't actually care about their views, yeah, there's something you're doing that is arguably a little bit dishonest. It really depends on the context. So let's say you're a prosecutor and you're examining somebody's position on something, or you're seeing what, you know, you're trying to get testimony into the person. You might care to establish the facts, but you might not be genuinely interested in their perspective or their view of the world. You're just trying to establish the facts, whatever they might be. So really depending on the context, whether that would be something intellectually dishonest. I'm assuming you're thinking specifically of intellectual discussions, in which case, yeah, it very well might be dishonest in those contexts. Tony, the guy in blue is handling pretty well. I'd be pretty pissed at the guy in red's rhetoric. Yeah, I think I would too. So this person says, I only need to care about my intellectual development, and so treat others as tools to achieve that in order to ask about someone's morality. Akil says he presumably has to project to communicate to the crowd. Maybe so, but do you think he needs to project with that kind of body language and tone? I don't know. It's not that big of a deal.
You should feel you would feel bad coming back in this society, right?
Shoulds
Talking over me.
Shoulds
And you've talked over us as well, so it's a match. Don't worry.
See, okay, so Akil says he presumably has to project to communicate to the crowd, but he's got like this big smile on his face. It's coming off to me as a bit condescending. It's a bit patronizing the way he's talking to them. And I think if I was going to give advice to, I don't know what you would call them, apologists, street preachers, people that go to campuses and argue with people, to me, this would rub me the wrong way. It comes off like I wouldn't like a person doing that to other people or to me, and it would make me have a pretty negative. It would turn me somewhat negatively disposed. Like I would start developing a somewhat of a negative and hostile disposition towards somebody that was talking to somebody with that tone and that vibe. It's not a good vibe.
I let you speak a lot.
It's
Continue.
It's all relative to say that something is objectively wrong. It's objective based off of our society's beliefs.
It's objective based off of our society's beliefs. So I think the person talking to Cliffe and Stewart is not being precise or clear. He might have some confusions here about the terminology. It's just very unclear what his position actually is. So, you know, in their defense, it's reasonable for them to be frustrated. Someone's arguing with him and the person is not making a whole lot of sense. So I kind of just feel like this is three people all not making sense.
And we're
Saying
saying
something
no.
is objectively wrong in general over the course of all of history,
Yes.
that is based off of our current society's beliefs.
And we're saying Abraham Lincoln was right when he led a civil war that said to the South, you are wrong. Enslaving African Americans is evil, and we're willing to die to stop it. What an arrogant bigot Abraham Lincoln was, or what a man in touch with reality, in touch with objective.
See the false dichotomy there? Either Abraham Lincoln was a terrible bigot or realism. What?
Morals, that he would put it on the line and say, we're going to end slavery. You don't understand that? You're smarter. You understand what I just said to you.
At the time, society believed that.
Yeah, so you see that pause from the person that they're talking to. I would pause, maybe. For me, I actually was like, oh, false dichotomy. But I'm trying to imagine myself in this context. I think I would be kind of floored or paralyzed by the rhetoric and the poor argumentation that they're presenting here. This is very, very bad. And I think it'd be very difficult to have a conversation with them in this context. It's very loud, abrasive, false dichotomies, and assertion. We're not seeing arguments here. We're not seeing any substantive attempt to make a case for moral realism. It's just all kind of it's rhetorical browbeating and trying to imply, look, agree with me or you're evil, agree with me if you're you're evil, agree with me or you'd have evil views. And I think the undertone is what's underlying this is you're not really evil, and so you don't really think what you think. You actually are a realist just like me. That seems to be the vibe that I'm getting here. And this is a common vibe that I see from realists. Everybody's a realist. People might say they're not, but really on some implicit level, they're all crypto realists. And they might have espoused this goofy relativist stuff. But if you talk to them, you can unpack their hidden realist attitudes underneath. I think that's the vibe I'm getting here in what they're trying to do.
That slavery was, in general, a good thing.
Yeah, and Abraham Lincoln.
So again, the descriptive claims that, people at the time thought slavery was a good thing. Yeah, some of them thought slavery was a good thing. Who gives a shit? Who cares what they thought? Being an anti-realist doesn't mean you have to care about what other people think. And so he's making a descriptive claim.
Lincoln said no.
But there was also large groups of people during the time that believed that slavery was a bad thing.
Yeah.
So viewing that as
so you see how Cliff is just like, yeah, yeah. I'm on Cliff's side at this point, because Cliff is making a meta-ethical claim, and this person he's talking to is responding by making descriptive claims. So, hey, this was objectively wrong. Yes, but some of the people at the time thought it was morally right. Some of the people at the time thought it was morally wrong. Yeah, true. What's your point? I don't know what the point is.
objective wrong. That's still just another example of the beliefs of the society at the time.
No, it's not. It is a claim that slavery is absolutely evil. Therefore, I am willing to put my life on the line to end it. It's not relatively evil. It's not me foisting my cultural bias on the Southerners. It is me holding to
that term again, bias, having attitudes or preferences. It's weird to call them biases.
Moral absolute. Slavery is evil.
But just because one person believes that doesn't believe that another person believes that.
That obviously.
It doesn't mean that another person thinks that is the objective truth.
Obviously.
So how can there be an objective truth if not everyone believes it? It's all
Ooh, that's a big mistake on his part. How can there be an objective truth if not everybody believes it? Very simple. Right now, does everybody believe the earth is round? No. Does that mean the earth isn't round? No, it doesn't mean that. The earth is round. Just because there's a few flat earthers doesn't mean the earth isn't round. So something being objective does not require consensus or unanimity. This is a big mistake on the part of the person they're talking to.
Got to be kidding me. You honestly believe that in order for there to be an objective truth, everybody's got to agree on it? Are you serious? That is so scary. It's incredible. You think
I'm kind of on the side here.
Get everybody to agree that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong.
Now he got the normative entanglement.
And then it's wrong? But if there are...
Dude, that's not necessary. All he would have to do is point out like any scientific fact, like, hey, George Washington was the first president of the United States. If we could find one person that doesn't agree with that, does that mean he was not the first president of the United States? Or that it's relative, that he was if you believe it, but he wasn't if you don't? I mean, that'd be ridiculous. So just point to some factual matter and then point out it clearly doesn't require unanimity for it to be objectively true, and then move on. You don't have to go for the normative entanglement and saying, well, implying if you're not a realist, you're evil or you have evil views. Why? Why do that?
A few people who think abusing an innocent child is okay, that therefore it's okay.
I'm telling you, how is it objective if not everyone believes it?
Because objectively, you are created in the image of God. You have been given a value by God that culture and individual, the power elite, the intelligentsia cannot change. It is objectively true. You have value, which means that if anybody devalues you, that is absolutely evil. Objectively evil.
It's not about emotionally feeling it or emotionally just believing in it. No, it's the oughts and should above. It's appealing to a moral transcendent obligation and duties. Please go and check this out. Moral obligation and duties that we buy into. You're right. Cultures are different. Cultures are different. There's honor killings in certain cultures. You're exactly right. But we still, every single person knows the value of a human being, that they have innate value and dignity. Even cannibals, study of cannibals, still, you have to dehumanize before you actually. No, it's not tied. No.
So, and claim everybody knows that people have innate value. Do they? What's the evidence for that? Again, assertions. There's no arguments here.
No. Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians, Jews all say that this is tied to a god. They would differ on what god it is. But even when we talk to one of the top atheists who wrote the Oxford Introduction to Atheism, Julie Bagini, says that the moral argument is the toughest.
Julie Bagini? Is that what isn't it Julian? I don't know how to say the last name. Yeah, Julian. I don't know how to say his last name though, but it sounded like he said Julie Bagini.
This for an atheist to get around, because it breaks into your life in such a way where there are moral oughts, shoulds, and duties in your.
Yeah, well, who cares what one person said? Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I don't know why Christian apologists will do this. So they're like, well, I found an atheist who made a claim, so now what? Okay, so an atheist made a claim. They could defend it, maybe they do a good job, but it's not like, hey, another atheist said this, so it's true. What the hell kind of move is that? It's real weird.
Or life, and you know it, and you live it out day to day. And you do not make it up. And the statement, when you started out here saying, oh, it's just relativism. Well, that's a relative statement. So why should I buy in to your statement of it's just all relative? That sounds very objective by you stating it's all relative.
No, I'm not saying that objectively, everyone believes their own beliefs.
How's that?
Well, I mean, that's true. Objectively, everybody believes their own beliefs. So like, it's true that it's like, and it stands independently or objectively true that I believe that certain things are right or wrong. That's true. I don't know what follows from that.
Objectively, it's all relative.
Yeah, subjective.
Yeah, I don't know why they're saying objective or subjective. No, it's objectively true that people have their beliefs. If you mean subjective, you might say it's like having a belief is subjective because a belief is a mental state, and by subjective you mean like held from a certain point of view. But then you're equivocating in the meaning of subjective, because subjective in the metaethical context or relative in the metaethical context would mean something like made true in some indexicalized way or made true relative to the standards of the individual. It has something to do with what serves as truth makers for moral claims, whereas subjective in the other case is like this like ontological thing about what the nature of the phenomena in question is. Is it a mental phenomena in particular or something, or is held from a perspective? Whereas like there are 3 hydrogen atoms over there wouldn't be held from a perspective. It'd be some like perspectiveless truth. Now, technically I'm a perspectivalist, so I don't think anything is free of perspective, but that would be like a standard view about the matter. Let's see this out, and then we'll get back to the chat.
No, everyone believes their own beliefs. Everyone holds their own value system, their own morals.
Yeah.
Descriptive.
So the fact that there is an objective right and wrong, different societies throughout time have had a majority of people in societies have had a belief that a certain thing is right or
Right.
a certain thing is wrong
Right.
that we would think are completely different than
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. That's reality.
So
That's reality.
Up to this point, unless he takes this in a radically enlightening direction, that didn't come off as coherent to me. It just sounds like he's saying different people have different beliefs, which like is true, but at best it sounds like something trivial is being said. I'm not sure that something substantive and coherent is being expressed here.
Reality.
during those times, who was thinking, oh, these things are objectively wrong?
People who believed in God for thousands of years have understood God has given commands.
Okay. People for thousands of years have understood that God has given commands. Does that mean people for thousands of years have been moral realists? Is that I would question. We're like, is there evidence of that? How do we know that they were realists? All right. And Yinzi says, hey, Lance, is there a particular reason you're so passionate about meta ethics? Why does it interest you? No, there's not. I don't know why. If you want to ask more about that, feel free, but I have no idea why this interests me. It's aggressive and insufferable. He's being rude and loud and annoying and not treating the other guy with respect. Which one do you mean? Do you mean Cliff and Stewart, or do you mean the other person? I mean, I agree with someone that commented on how they're probably trying to project to the audience around them. But some of the body language and vibe that they're giving off strikes me as unnecessary. All right. Talking over, putting words in his mouth. He's trying to make the other guy look bad to win over the crowd. This is why debating college kids videos generally suck. It just descends into yelling. Yeah. It's not great. Just sitting at yelling at each other. Okay, and Yancy continues. But it gets clicks and views, and I think that's the point. Yeah, 120,000 views. Real popular. Meanwhile, I get like, what, 1,000 views on a video if I'm lucky? I get 500 or 600 sometimes. You know, maybe I got to go argue with people in public. I don't know. And Yinzi says, I'd like to see Lance do some applied ethics videos. I don't think you would like to see me do that. What would I say? Mind Onion says, aren't they creationists? I don't know. If the chat can address that, let me know. I have no idea if they're creationists or not. And Yinzi says, ha ha ha. It's so funny to me. These debates always go to like eating babies or beating children or some crazy stuff. It's always like violence against children. Why did they go there so random? There's actually a reason why philosophers have started to do that. And then I think other people just copy them, is that typically you want to pick examples of moral transgressions that nobody is plausibly going to give this kind of response. So if I say, hey, stealing is objectively wrong, here's a response naive anti-realists will give. They'll say, no, there are some circumstances where it's okay to steal, like to save a person's life. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not stance independently wrong. It would be stance independently wrong to steal in the other cases, and stance independently true that it's not morally wrong to steal in that case. But that's completely consistent with realism. So often what's happening is that people are conflating whether something is stance independently right or wrong with whether or not some category of action, like stealing or lying or whatever, whether there are exceptions to its general wrongness. So you might say lying is wrong, but here are some circumstances, like lying is generally wrong, but there are circumstances where lying would be permissible, good, or even obligatory. Like, you know, lying to people banging on the door saying, like, where are you hiding the Jews? Well, you should lie to those people. Fuck those people, right? So there are circumstances where lying would be good, but that has nothing to do with stance dependence versus independence. That has to do with the sensitivity of some category of action to context, some category of action like intentionally telling people things that you don't think is true, whether or not it's morally right or wrong to do that on both anti-realist and realist views will typically turn on sensitivity to the context, nothing to do with stance independence or independence. That would be like some contextualist, absolutist distinction. It's just a different distinction. And yet, if you give people like it stands independently wrong to lie or it stands independently wrong to kill people, people will go, but the context, and totally relevant. So these situations are typically, you try to give scenarios like torturing someone for fun to give enough context where a person isn't going to go, but what about torturing one person to stop someone from torturing a million people? What about that? So people will try to do that. And it's just a confusion on the part of people raising those objections. So this isn't intended just to avoid counterexamples that are legitimate. It's to try to circumvent or anticipate and circumvent in advance potential confusions that result from conflating meta-ethical considerations from non-meta-ethical considerations. So why do people go for these like top shelf, really extreme stuff? That's one reason. The other reason is normative entanglement. Rhetorically, it's very effective to imply anti-realists are evil. And so if you say, hey, if you're an anti-realist, then you would be okay with telling white lies, maybe. Or you wouldn't object if someone told a white lie. An anti-realist might be like, yeah, that seems fine. But if you say to an anti-realist, well, then you're okay with someone rounding up and torturing babies all day long. Well, you're probably not okay with that. So at that point, you might go, whoa, hold up here. Anti-realism does not mean I'm okay with that. And it doesn't. But if they can imply that it does, then they can imply you're either not really an anti-realist. You don't really believe what you say you do. So they've exposed a confused or dishonest idiot in the argument. Or you've exposed an evil psychopath. This is idiot or psychopath. So typically it's, hey, if you're an anti-realist, I'm going to do everything in my power to show you're an idiot or a psychopath, or you're a liar. So it's always like some subtle, it's not always, but you get this frequent critique against the anti-realists themselves rather than someone clearly explaining why anti-realism is incorrect. Note, by the way, one of the things that's really weird about this too, let's just suppose anti-realism was true. What would the realist arguments look like? Like, oh, so it would be okay for these people to torture those people. Let's just say it was okay. Okay, yeah, then I guess it's okay. That's unfortunate, but that doesn't make it false. So what? And it also doesn't mean that, like, it's not like it's your fault if anti-realism is true. And yet they often when people are critiquing anti-realism, they critique it like, well, you're endorsing anti-realism, so like you're on the hook for the truth of the position. It's real weird. As if you're responsible for the normative and practical implications that follow if it happens to be true. Are you responsible? Why would you be responsible for that?
He's given us a conscience, and we, by exercising that conscience, can understand what is morally true, good, and real. Therefore, if you try and sexually assault her, I'm going to try and physically stop you. Why? Because she has value, he has value, and when you sexually assault her, you're not like the baboons, you're not like the chimpanzees who do sexually assault each other. Male baboons and chimpanzees sexually assault female baboons and chimpanzees. You're not a baboon, you're a human being created in the image of God. God has created her, not as a baboon or as a chimpanzee, but as a woman created in his image. And therefore, if you try and sexually assault her, I will physically try to stop you because I'm convinced it's objectively wrong, morally absolutely wrong for a man to sexually assault a woman.
So if you,
I don't know what that person's involvement in this is, but that whole thing would make me really uncomfortable the way he's setting this up. It's a lot of rhetoric here.
from the perspective of believing in objective truth, like from your perspective, believing that there is an objective truth of an objective right and wrong with certain situations,
Yes.
certain moral
Yes, sir.
quandaries, whatever.
Correct.
How you're basically saying that is innately from a higher power, from God. That
If it's real.
we have an objective.
If it is real, there's only one way it can be, that there is some mind prior to his mind, prior to
There's only one way it can be. Arguments, please.
my mind, prior to her mind, that creates and defines her with value.
But if you look at evolution, how do you know that that's not just? I mean, you look at, in the most basic example,
Right.
you look at crabs, and
Right.
they hatch and they go to the moon. They follow the moon to the ocean.
Okay?
How do you know that it's not just something?
Do crabs follow the moon to the ocean? It sounds like he's implying crabs are born on land and then they go into the ocean. I would have immediately thought of sea turtles. Is he mixing up crabs with sea turtles? I know that's random, but it just looks a little weird. Like that. Sorry, sounds a little weird what he's describing here.
Something that we've developed over evolution, over time, that we have developed as humans to, hey, you know what? We innately believe that there is good, that there is value in each individual person. How do you know that that's not something that we've
Because that's
developed over
the
evolution
opposite
over
of what evolution teaches. It's the strong eat the weak. It's the powerful are in control. That's why Hitler
What? Evolution does not. Hold on.
at that time that we have developed as humans to, hey, you know what? We innately believe that there is good, that there is value in each individual person. How do you know that that's not something that we've
because that's
developed over?
Okay, so that absolutely could have been a product of natural selection. Now, I don't think that it is. I don't think that we evolved to regard one another as having innate value. But look what they go on to say.
the opposite of what evolution teaches.
That is not the opposite of what evolution teaches. Natural selection as a mechanism for driving evolutionary change. There are other mechanisms, genetic drift or whatever, but it's specifically the sort of mechanism that gives rise to organismic diversity on Earth. It is primarily natural selection. Now, the process of natural selection is completely, it's not ideological, and it does not entail or require that organisms act selfishly, aggressively, viciously, competitively. It is completely consistent with the way that natural selection operates for individuals of a species to be incredibly altruistic and pro-social. Think of eusocial insects. So ants, termites, bees. They are able to work cooperatively as groups. So are many organisms in other species. It does not require reciprocal altruism. It does not require, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Organisms will assist one another on kin selective grounds. So from a natural selection perspective, natural selection doesn't just say, it doesn't really say anything. I'm anthropomorphizing it. It's not like, hey, just get as many of genes directly through your own offspring into the next generations. Your cousins, nephews, nieces, brothers, sisters, parents, uncles, nephews, all of them. They share genes with you. And so to the extent that you facilitate their survival and reproduction, because that's really what natural selection cares about, survival is a means to an end. The end is reproduction. So long as you're assisting them at reproducing by keeping them alive, helping out their family, providing resources, there's all these auxiliary means by which you could help out those who share your genes, then natural selection will favor, all else being equal, behavior that will do so. Now, of course, if it's prioritizing your own offspring versus like second cousins, organisms will tend to evolve mechanisms for facilitating the welfare of their own offspring. So there's prioritization that goes on here, but there isn't an exclusive emphasis on yourself or your own children. Organisms can and do exhibit concerns for the welfare of others. Now, humans don't necessarily have to rely on some sort of like mathematical equation of kin selection, nor do they have to rely on reciprocal altruism. We have established ourselves as being adapted to the cultural niche. So humans have this long developmental period that they go through, and that developmental period is geared towards, from a selection perspective, we've got these big old brains that work to say, hey, what's my culture say? Pick up the stuff from my culture, learn the norms, learn the values, learn the attitudes, learn the behaviors, and learn the techniques, tools, and methods for extracting resources from my environment, navigating social situations, and getting by. We are cultural organisms, and cultural norms can instill in people attitudes and values that promote pro-social behavior and get them to act nicely towards one another. It doesn't have to come from God, and natural selection selected for humans being these highly culturally dependent organisms. So natural selection just doesn't favor ruthlessness or anything like that. It does in some like that's one thing that could be selectively advantageous, but being pro-social and helpful and altruistic can also be advantageous from a selective perspective. So this view that natural selection teaches that people can't be this way, totally wrong. They don't know what they're talking about.
It's the strong eat the weak.
No, yeah, that's false. Natural selection does not entail the strong eat the weak. In lots of instances, the strong protect the weak, and that's advantageous for them to do from a selective perspective.
It's the powerful are in control. That's why Hitler picked up Nietzschean thinking, which was based off of evolutionary psychology.
Well, he says Nietzschean thinking based off of evolutionary psychology. I don't know how accurate the interpretations of Nietzsche were. Nietzsche had been aware of the theory of evolution at the time, to my knowledge, but evolutionary psychology, how it would have been in an extraordinarily rudimentary form at the time. So That isn't to say that there wouldn't have been evolutionary thinking, but there's something a bit weird, and I don't know what the opposite of anachronistic is, but he's using a modern term to refer to ideas that at the time predated that term, evolutionary psychology. But I think I get the gist of what he's saying here.
which says strong eat the weak. There is the Uberman. There is the
The what?
powerful role. That's why Hitler picked up Nietzschean thinking,
He's talking about the Ubermensch?
which was based off of evolutionary psychology, which says strong eat the weak. There is the Uberman. There is
The Uber. It sounds like he said the Uberman or the Ubermonk. I don't know. Ubermensch idea is pretty complicated. So I'm not going to get like, look, there is a difference between saying, hey, I'm going to step outside the cultural paradigms that have instilled in Western society this particular perspective of morality that favors meekness, humility, and subservience. And I'm going to create my own values and live in a world where I act in accord with my own goals, interests, and ambition. And being a psychopathic, exploitative asshole who kills other people for fun. You don't have to do that to reject Christian values or to reject their particular conception of morality. Being a sort of someone that rejects one's own cultural, like throwing off your culture's values, doesn't require that you be some sort of monster. And it certainly doesn't require that you comport with some distinctively ruthless notion of natural selection. That's not a requirement for people's behavior. Like natural selection doesn't require that you try to accord with some particular perspective on what natural selection is all about. This is weird. Why would that have to be the case?
Is the powerful race. And so you never get morality, especially Judeo-Christian morality that you and I buy into every single day, out of evolutionary psychology.
That's real weird. So you might not get Judeo-Christian morality out of it. I don't know why you couldn't get a pretty, like from an evolutionary perspective, whether it be like I would favor some gene culture co-evolutionary account, but even from like there's nativist views of morality that would be completely consistent with people being more or less how they are now. So there's nativist views of moral cognition. I don't see the problem. But why would those be? Why would we reject those? Like I reject them because I don't think the evidence supports something like Richard Joyce's nativism, but I don't think the view is like preposterous. I just don't think it's empirically well supported. But it would not, like natural selection is perfectly capable of making people compassionate, helpful, pro-social. Doesn't have any problem with that. I mean, there are some challenges. There's some things like, to the extent that we do exhibit these behaviors, how did that happen? It's not that easy to explain how it could have happened, but there's no like in principle reason why natural selection couldn't have done that. There's a question of whether it did, but there's no question that it could have done it. It could have. All right, let's have a look at some comments. Tony D3 says, I wonder if people like this would be more open to anti-realism or relativism if it were just named differently. I feel like these people haven't looked into this past the names. I think that's very frequently true. I did propose, I have a couple blog posts talking about this where I criticized the framing of realism versus anti-realism. I proposed alternative labels. None of them are really going to catch on. So you could have, for instance, moral descriptivism versus moral Morianism. So Morians would be all the non-naturalists, or at least many of them. And then descriptivists would be ones that reduce moral claims to descriptive claims of some kind. And that would include like myself and naturalists. That's one reframing of the dispute. And in that case, there would be more descriptivists than there were Morians, but in fact, a lot more. Alternative proposals for carving up the territory are probably not going to be very successful. It's hard to engineer something like that. But Tony D3 has a great proposal here. Imagine if anti-realism was named something completely off topic, like schmoogly boogly, then people would actually have to take the time to understand the position. Well, I don't know if you called it schmoogly boogly if they would, because that might make it sound completely ridiculous. Maybe if you called it something cool. All right. Yeah, you could go for some cool name like dieselism. Like Vin Diesel. Everybody knows Vin Diesel is cool. So if you called it dieselism, then people will be like, oh, that's a badass view. And if you endorse that view, you care about your family. So I want to be a dieselist. Should we call it that? I don't know. Maybe we should. All right. Nitty says, I use the following to illustrate anti-realism for moral epistemology. Aliens, highly expressive in the ways we believe are love, etc. They seem to eat. All right. I don't know where you're going with that. Trying to track what you're saying there. Okay, I don't know. You'll have to clarify. Zictomorph says, Sue, it sounds like this on webcam interviews too. Really? I don't remember or have a sense. I've seen them in videos and discussions, so but I don't have a good memory of how they were in there. Cloud of Time says, yes, they are creationists. Oh boy. Nitty says, Stuart and Cliffe are 100% creationists. When did you say this? 20 minutes ago. Wow. Okay. Well, let me get caught up. Nitty says, Stuart and Cliffe are 100% creationists and might be young earth creationists. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, definitely literal flood. Oh boy. Yeah, that's probably why they came up in my radar. So Robin Roswell says, these are the dudes that run Alex O'Connor podcast a few days ago. I saw that. I haven't really watched much of that. There was something about like Bible morality stuff that wasn't of a huge interest to me. But I think that they posted the whole discussion, so I may go check that out. All right. Jimothy says, I would like to see them use these, quote, arguments against someone who is actually pro-baby torture. I don't think there would be any follow-up for someone that beyond just calling them evil. Yeah, so like what if someone was like said that they were cool with baby torture, what would they do at that point? You're evil. That wouldn't show that they're incorrect. So calling them like I would agree they're evil, but like, are they incorrect? What are they incorrect about? So like baby torturers, let's all agree, realist and anti-realist, they're evil. We just disagree about whether they're incorrect. I don't particularly care if they're incorrect. I don't want them torturing babies. Like, what if they're correct to torture babies? Like, well, so much for being correct. Then I'm against being correct, I guess. I'm more committed to baby torture than realists. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention this. Modern Moralist says, congratulations on 100 vids. I did make a community post about this. This is my 101st video. So I've been on here a couple of years and I've done 100 videos. That's a lot. Does that mean I've done like a video every 3 or 4 days? That's a lot of videos. Holy crap. Maybe I need to take another break. Should I take like a month off? Should I do that? Because I've been doing a lot of videos lately. Maybe I need some time to decompress from all this stuff. I don't know. I've kind of been writing that How to Humor Debate momentum. Yeah, we're not going to do that. Yeah, Tony D3 says, no, I think crabs swim to the moon. Christmas crabs eat their babies by the thousands. I get Timothy talking about were crabs. Ooh, I know what kind of imagery I'm using for the thumbnail for this. It's going to be something with crabs. You think I could do a were crab, like a person that's part crab, part human? Maybe I'll try to come up with something like that. It won't make any sense for people because this happens like what, an hour and a half into the video where the crabs thing comes up. So they're going to go, why the hell is there a crab? What does that have to do with meta ethics? Too bad. It'll be an obscure reference. So it's our inside thing, everybody that's still here. I still don't get, by the way, I don't get this. Okay. I'm streaming. I get, this started with like 10 or so people, but I'm at like over 30 people right now in the stream. Why do I get 30 people in the stream? I only have like 1.7 thousand subscribers. And then I see channels where people have like 20, 30, 40,000 subscribers and they get like 40 viewers instead of 30. Why is my view count consistently way higher as a proportion of my subscriber base than other people? Like, I feel like I'm punching for streams above my subscriber count, weight or whatever the analogy would be. But the channel growth has really stagnated. So, I wanted to get 1,000 people the first year and I achieved that. That was my sort of like New Year's goal. I hit 1,000 like right afterwards. So I still counted it. That's okay. But I've only got another 700 this past year, and I'm closing in on the end of the year. I don't know what happened. Why was this year so much slower? I haven't really slowed down that much. I took a, what was it, 6 weeks off, but I didn't take that much time off. So I don't know why the channel hasn't been growing. All right, still going through the chat.
Would you?
Yeah, you could get.
How do you get serving one another? How do you get loving one another? How do you get sacrificing for one another? How do you get, hey, feed the starving, live for human rights out of evolution, universal?
That's not a problem at all. What does he think ants do? They sacrifice one another for the good of the hive. This is weird. Why do they think evolution can't make organisms altruistic or care for one another? I mean, it's even possible that there's some, evolved predisposition to believe in God. This is very strange to think that evolution couldn't, endow people with some predisposition to act in these sorts of ways. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm still going through the chat. There's just so much chat I got to catch up on. I love it. I love that everybody's so active in the chat. Zach says, I feel kind of bad for the other person trying to express some naive, confused general relativism. Yeah, it is somewhat confused and underdeveloped. And I feel like if I was going to talk to someone that had a contrary view, I would try to help them like work out the view Socratically and clarify what they were saying. But they keep jumping, like just sort of jumping in, interrupting, being really pretty verbally brute in their approach. I don't like the style that they're taking here. All right. Tony D3 says new Pokemon, the Uberman. Yeah, Uberman. I got Uberman again. Everybody's saying Uberman. Uberman, Nietzsche's favorite Pokemon. Dave the Brahmin says, isn't Cliff rather low-hanging fruit? Look, low-hanging fruit. So I should only review videos by Mike Humer and Russ Schaefer Landau and David Enoch. I don't think so. Meta ethics is one of these views that makes a popular appearance in a lot of places. And part of my goal in defending moral anti-realism is defending anti-realism against broad public anti-realist rhetoric that depicts it in false and misleading ways. And I think that's going on here. And I think it's going on in a lot of other places. Now, I do think a lot of it comes from professional philosophers. I mean, it'd be a little weird if the only thing that I did was review videos with popular discussions like this. But I just had a discussion with Mike Humer. I've had discussions with David Enoch. So I want to talk on both sides of the aisle. I want to talk in academic and formal contexts, and I want to talk outside of them. And I don't see anything wrong with doing both. In fact, I think it would be a mistake not to do both. All right. Lots of people talking about natural selection. Yeah, and Yinzi says, Richard Dawkins helps people's misconception of natural selection by calling his book The Selfish Gene. I think he's talked about that either in later forewords or in other writing. It's a cool metaphor, the selfish gene, but unfortunately, it didn't help with all the anti-evolution rhetoric. So I agree. Tony D3 says, I'm a proud schmoogly boogler. It's a horrible name. I'm going to go with dieselism. Come on. Okay, let's do. In fact, I want two proposals, other proposals for what to call anti-realism, and we're going to do a poll on how to rename anti-realism. The options so far are dieselism and schmoogly booglyism, and then we're going to need two more. And I'm going to try to get through the chat, and then I'll get caught up. Oh my God, how many more posts are there? All right. Oh, okay. Let's just keep going. Why not? I could stream and just keep going through the chat, even if it makes it hard to get through this whole video. I feel like we could get through the whole video, though. All right. And he says South Park had crab people. Nady says you're part of the atheist sphere. I don't know why. I don't even think I've ever done a video on it. So how am I part of that? There's a crab emoji. Okay, I can endorse that. David Hume goat format. What? What the hell kind of name is that? That's a funny name. Okay. People really like meta ethics. I like it. Akil says bot subs. Is that true? Do other people have bot subscribers? I don't want that. I want actual subscribers. Oh, this is David Hume must be addressing why I get more people in my stream. People really like meta ethics and too few streamers. Yeah, whatever happened to all the streaming? Did people used to stream more and they stream less now? Because I don't see a lot of streams and I'm subscribed to a hell of a lot of channels. What the hell happened to all the streaming? Where did it go? Is everybody on TikTok now? If you stream about the WWE, you have lots of options, like the wrestling thing. People like to talk about Roman Reigns. Roman's reign. Is that okay? I don't even know what you're talking about. But not Richard Joyce. People should talk more about Richard Joyce. All right, Captive Desk. Glad to have you. Says good evening, Lance. Good evening to you. All right, Jimothy says fans are probably more invested. People might think they are going to miss much if they don't turn into every gaming stream someone does or tune into. Okay. Nitty says if you cover a popular apologist, it'll get views. I really didn't think that much about it getting a lot of views. It just kept popping up like the videos on Alex O'Connor's channel. So I was like, fine, I'll review something from them. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see if it gets views. I'm not seeing a big bump in the stream, even though I tagged him. And Yinzi says, I think you saturated the market. Not many people are that interested in meta ethics. Plus, the algorithm punishes you for these long videos because people click off or don't watch. Is that a problem? Like that the videos are long? Like if I did short videos, would the channel grow faster? And I got to eventually get to the survey too. Okay. Saturated the market. Yeah. If I do a search for moral realism now, it'll be like videos like me, and someone else. Me, someone else. Same thing happened on TikTok. Go on TikTok and search for moral realism. See what you get. And then he continues to say, I'm part of the atheist sphere. I'm in the gang. All right. The algorithm hates that. If you want more sins, I think you need subscribers. You need shorter videos with high engagement. Yeah, why is it like that? That's dumb. Why would they punish long form content? Not that I shouldn't do the shorter videos, but why is it like that? All right. I hate the silences as I'm reading through comments. There's just so many of them. That's not a complaint. It's a lot. It's a lot for me to deal with. I think it's awesome. So thanks everybody, by the way, for making this so interactive and engaging for me. Because I don't feel like, I could come here and review a video and feel like it's technically live, but nobody's here. And then it would be really boring and lonely. It makes me feel good that people are in the chat, like engaging and commenting. I think it's awesome, especially because this is the 101st video and probably 90 of those are on meta ethics. So you all have some kind of incredible endurance for repeating the same topic 6 trillion times. I'm just going to keep talking about it. All right. Eventually I'll get caught up. Maybe people are talking faster than I could get through the comments. Patrick, this is a little unrelated, but I'd like to become better acquainted with meta ethics in a more serious way than just watching videos. Do you have recommendations for basic reading on the topic? I actually don't. There's not a lot of basic reading. So as far as, what do you mean by basic? So I could recommend a couple books. So there's the Alexander book. Let me get the exact title. 1 second. Might as well address this now and not put it off. I think it's called Meta Ethics, A Contemporary Introduction. Oh, that's the Van Rooyen one. What is the... Oh, Alexander. It's not Alexander. It's Alex Miller. What am I talking about? 1 second. An Introduction to Contemporary Meta Ethics. So the problem with this, though, is that I didn't find it, like, it's hard for me to judge how accessible things are because by the time I read it, I already did meta ethics. And I'm like, I'll read an intro kind of book. But I think it's pitched for, and it's intended as kind of a reference guide for like an advanced undergraduate or maybe a graduate student. It's kind of book you could probably give as a quick primer for like if you're teaching meta ethics to students in their first year in a PhD or master's program, it'd probably be a viable book in that for that kind of audience. For freshmen, though, this would probably be a tough read. So as far as intro material, I am not sure. There's not a lot. So Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy might be a go-to. Oh, I'll recommend one. Spencer Case and Matt Lutz have a book called Is Morality Real? It's an exchange or back and forth between a moral realist and a moral anti-realist. I think there's parts of that get a bit technical or tough to follow, but overall, it's one of the more accessible books that I've seen. So you could check that one out. I think that would be a pretty good one, actually. So as far as like something more accessible, check that out. It's recent, it's contemporary, it's up to date. They're both, pretty clear writers. It's not a bunch of obscure, weird stuff. It is able to give a retrospective on the state of the field. That's very, very recent because it came out a year or two ago. Like it came out recently. So check that one out. That's what I'd recommend. Check that out and check out the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. If you want videos that give like a detailed and organized coverage, Kane B has a whole series of meta ethics too. So those I think would be the main options. Like, I don't think there's like a great courses on meta ethics or anything like that. And that's unfortunate. Oh, right. And Yinzi, I think you're the one that asks how I got into meta ethics. I know I was like, I don't know, but that's the truth. I'm going back to that question, but I don't know why I got into meta ethics. I could speculate. One thing I could tell you is there's a big difference between how I got into it and why I've decided to stick with it. And part of the reason I've decided to stick with it is because I became very frustrated with the vibe I got from realists and the way that they spoke about and handled anti-realism. I noticed a lot of what struck me as misframing and as all these meta-philosophical issues, like, my intuitions. I never had their intuitions. I don't recall ever having those intuitions. And I had all these experiences of people saying, you don't have the intuition that blah, blah, blah. No. And I didn't like the way that people treated me. People were sometimes incredulous. I got accused of lying. And that's continued. I get accused of lying pretty much every week, of people telling me, he doesn't really think that. He's pretending. He's disingenuous. He's bad faith. Every week. Where you have this very dogmatic view about human psychology and the role it plays in philosophy, that people will say, people think this, people experience this. And if you say, hey, I don't, you get treated like shit by those people. Yes, you do. You're pretending. It's ridiculous. And it annoys me. It annoys me that what I saw from mainstream analytic philosophy is this kind of shitty, dogmatic bullying attitude towards dissident views. And that made me interested in those dissident views. Why? If the analytic mainstream view was so awesome, they shouldn't have to bully rival views. They could just explain why they're wrong. And they didn't. And that made me receptive to those views. I started looking at views. I don't endorse all these views, but there's all these critical dissonant views, ordinary language philosophy, logical positivism, all these views, like views that I'm told are dead. They're not dead. Views I'm told are wrong. The objections against them suck. That doesn't mean I endorse the view. I could find problems with the view. But there seems to be this triumphal, like slaying the beast view of the narrative within philosophy, and this trend towards retaining this through line through contemporary analytic philosophy that is rationalistic. Even when it's empiricist, it seems to pay only lip service to the sciences and wants to retain this weird view about language and meaning. And there's something culty about it. Something about like insular, don't take away our toys kind of vibe. And that bothers me. It bothers me because the very discipline that prides itself on open-mindedness doesn't strike me as very open-minded. And the very discipline that prides itself on clarity and precision isn't clear and isn't precise. That really ticks me off. It ticks me off because, I got sold on a discipline as being the place for someone with my interest to go. And when I get to the discipline, it's not what I expected. It's like I finally get to work in that Michelin star restaurant and I get in the kitchen and it's just cockroaches and rats everywhere. And, you know, American cheese, like Kraft singles and packages, and they're throwing it on the food. That's not what I signed up for. And that's what the current state of the field looks like to me. And I don't like it. And, you know, there's a lot of hostility towards people that have views critical of the field. And I have a sneaking suspicion that there's this effect where you have that central core of mainstream analytic philosophy with its dogmatic approach. And if people come along and criticize it, people will say, "Hey, don't take away our toys. Get out of here. We don't like your perspective." And people are driven off. And they're driven off because they feel unwelcome. Now, they don't have to be actively driven off, but when you know your views aren't getting the kind of reception, like if I was writing a bunch of papers on analytic metaphysics and stuff, you know, I could be doing a lot better citation wise, and I don't want to do that. So I feel like people that could be critics of the field are driven out of the field because they don't feel particularly welcome there. And that bothers me. It bothers me that I think that that's happening. And I think that philosophers either lack the self-awareness or notice and don't care. And I think that that's terrible. And I remember one time telling students in one of my classes, like, you know what fuels me? You know what energizes me? What gets me out of bed in the morning? Anger. I'm fueled by anger, the things that piss me off in the world. So, you know, people ask me why I don't talk about applied ethics and that sort of thing. I had some bad experiences with being really invested in my sort of applied attitudes, talking about problems in the world, and it takes an emotional toll on me. So, you know, I'll focus on minor issues that I could keep at somewhat of an arm's length because they're not the most important issues in the world, like problems with the peer review system in academia. That's not going to make or break human civilization. There's, you know, problems of environmental issues and other sorts of issues that are much bigger problems. I've stuck with issues that don't require me to focus too much on the direct problems that I and the world right now are facing. You know, that I deal with problems every day in my personal life, and if I had to sit here when I'm trying to get a little bit to step away from that for a bit and have to deal with even more issues that I'm powerless to change or do much about, talking about these issues doesn't solve these issues. And I think it would just make salient issues that made me feel bad. And I already face enough challenges as it is. So when people want me to talk about applied ethics issues, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. I'm not in a position to do that. And I don't really want to get too much into all of the reasons why, but I think my reasons are good. And if other people don't, or they don't know about them, oh well. But it's not that I don't want to give people what they want. It's that it would require me to adopt a different mindset, a mindset that wouldn't be good for me and would lead to burnout a lot quicker. I hope that makes some sense. I know I'm being vague on the details. All right. Esa Ponce says, what good timing Lance has. I was just watching this Cliffe video yesterday and wondering what Lance comments would be on it. Well, now you get them. Okay, we got Uber realism. That's going to be our third option. David Goat Format says, I play Goat. I really do. Do you mean like you get goats to make like ba noises as like a musical instrument, or am I missing something? What does that mean? I feel like I'm still way behind. When is this? 10:30. Okay, I'm 15 minutes behind. After this, I was on over 4 hours this evening. I don't know what you're talking about. Rick Swan says, Rick Swan. That name sounds. Never mind. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I forgot your. Okay. Will you release your TikTok debates relatively soon? I've been sitting on them for like 8 months. I just haven't posted them. I could tell you the stupid reason I haven't posted them. I really wanted to timestamp when different people appear in the TikTok, and I got too lazy to play the video, find when different people are talking, and then timestamp when the new person appears. That's the only reason I haven't posted them. They're just sitting here. not posted. So yeah, I have no reason not to post it. So I could just post it without them. I never ended up doing the poll, by the way. All right. Rayvax Beasley says, have you ever discussed Shelley Kagan's Answering Moral Skepticism on your channel? No, I have not. But let's get to creating the poll for renaming anti-realism. We're going to do it right now. Once and for all, we're going to have the correct solution to this problem. How do I create a poll again? Here we go. All right, start a poll. Oh, does it only allow me to have 3 options? No, it lets me have 4. Okay. Options are, what was it? Was it schmoogly booglyism? I might misspell it. All right. We've got, what's our other option? Was dieselism? Dieselism. Is that how we're going to, I don't think it matters very much. We've got uber realism. And then what's our final version of anti-realism? Okay. I'm gonna do anti-Maureenism. All right. So let me know what the correct version of anti-realism should be. All right. Looking through the comments again. Okay. A lot of times I was fueled by anger once. Now I'm just having a good time until my time is up. People are too lost in my view. All right. And Yinzi says, based, fueled by anger. Yeah. Akil says, I heard Michelin star is super fake. It's given out based on status. No idea if that's true. Timothy says, still waiting for the cooking stream. Unfortunately, I'm moving out of the place with the big kitchen island. So you're not gonna see anything there. Not until I get a big island. I'm moving again this coming weekend. So I think that's the 10th or 11th move in the past 12 years. Oh, I wish I didn't have to move so many times. All right. What else we got? Okay, I think I'm almost caught up. This was a good proposal from Mind Onion. Just go full rhetoric, rename moral anti-realism the truth. So maybe I should have done that. If you give me weird words that I see in the chat and I don't know what they mean, I'm not posting them because I don't know if I'm posting something terrible. All right, great. Now I'm giving people ideas. All right, so I think I got caught up in the chat. So I'll see where the poll goes. I'll leave it open and let's try to get through this video.
Well, you're just getting it from a book that was written by.
No, we're not getting it from a book.
Never
I
mentioned
told
the
you
book
Hindus,
once.
Jews.
So
I
please
told you
stop
everybody.
doing that.
Yeah,
We never said the book Bible once.
that's
It's not part of our
you were going
discussion
on.
right now. We're talking about your conscience. We're talking about the way you experience life.
How do you
And
know
I
that
bet,
humans
although
are
I can't prove it,
inherently that way. If there's an objective,
If you're
right or wrong,
different, tell
how
me.
do you know that humans don't inherently believe that in general? How do you know that that came from some sort of higher power?
it's real simple. It's real simple, sir.
A higher
If
power
you
is the
say
most-
there is no
the most
God,
simple way
then
to
reality is
explain
matter
what we
and
don't
energy.
Understand. Believing in God, believing in a higher power is the most human, simple way of explaining what we don't understand.
Baloney.
No.
I believe in God
No.
because God is the best explanation of what I see and observe. And what I'm trying to show you, sir, is what you believe is not the best explanation of why him sexually assaulting her is wrong. Because baboons and chimpanzees do it all the time, and it's not wrong for them. It's an instinct they have. But I'm hoping, you're right, maybe I'm wrong, I'm hoping that you agree with me that for him to sexually assault her is not good. It's really, really wrong.
At the beginning of every religion, it was all created by people trying to explain what they can't understand.
Baloney. Total baloney.
That is
Switching it up.
objectively the reality.
Oh, that's a cop-out, sir.
That's how
Total
religion was
cop-out.
created.
That's false.
But it's not.
People do not believe in God because they have to fill the gaps.
Yes,
Some people
because it
do.
was- no,
Some
I'm not
people
saying-
do.
I'm not saying now. I'm saying in the past.
Oh, in the past, them
Thousands-
ignorant people,
thousands-
right? No, baloney. Baloney.
People created religion. to
People
explain what they
believe
couldn't
in God,
understand.
first of
Because that was
all,
before
because they
science
see
existed.
order and
That was before
design,
modern
and they
science.
say,
That was-
wow. Secondly, they understand there's a meaning to life, and they say, wow. Thirdly, they
You're describing
experience
reasons
love,
why someone might
and they
choose to
say,
join a religion.
wow. No.
This is totally gone off the rails. They're just talking over one another. They're not staying focused. I thought this was a meta ethics discussion. This is not meta ethics. This is the origin of religion or something. This is not good.
If your worldview is correct, then love comes from right here, and energy, matter and energy. Remember, if you say there is no God, all of reality is matter and energy. You don't get love from matter and energy. Love is a free decision of a will to care for
Religion
somebody.
was developed over time, explaining what people couldn't understand,
Baloney.
and then writing that down. And it was
Sir, I believe in God because confronted by this man with the order and design, I don't say you're an accident. Why? Because accidents don't produce order and design. Accidents produce chaos. This is not chaos. This is not chaos. This is amazing order and design.
Oh God, if I was in that audience, I would really hope he wouldn't poke me or put his hand on my shoulder. This is make me uncomfortable watching it.
Therefore, it is far more reasonable, plausible to say, in the beginning, God, meaning by that intelligent mind, than it is to say, in the beginning, chance. You're a marvelous accident.
Who are these people in the audience? Why is he grabbing people and poking them? I wouldn't like that.
Baloney. It's not a marvelous accident. There's too much order and design.
That's what science has. The whole
Science?
universe.
Oh, come on, sir. Now, I have one quick illustration for this science, because you keep on bringing up science. Sir, scientifically, I know that I can prove that if I put arsenic in Grandma's tea, she will die. Science. But the question is, in light of the fact that Grandma has a really big stock portfolio and really large bank account, should I drop arsenic in her tea tonight so I can get the inheritance tomorrow? Science says zero. Zero. No, you listen. Come on. Think with me. That's not the point. The point is, science is a study of process.
I bring up science, and then you just completely change the subject to another.
To science, what you brought up. I didn't bring up science. You brought it up. You've used the word a couple of times. So I'm trying to straighten stuff out here. All right? Science can answer the question, what happens if you drop poison in Grandma's tea? She drinks it, she will die. Science does not answer the question, should you put poison in Grandma's tea? Because then she will die, and then you get the inheritance. That is an ethical question. Science does not answer the ethical question. So it's a different field of knowledge from ethics. Science is very important. Don't put poison in Grandma's tea because you will kill her. It does not answer the ethical question. In light of all the money that she has, should you kill her in order to get her money? That's an ethical.
Notice how he's projecting and talking to the crowd, and he's completely ignoring the person that he's talking to. I'm just going to say this comes off his way of engaging where he's turning his back and talking to the audience and not talking to the person that's there to have a conversation with him. It's very disrespectful. It's a very unpleasant way to engage with another person because it's engaging with him by not really engaging with him. It's treating him with such scornfulness and little regard that he's now preaching to the audience and using the person that's trying to have a conversation with him as a tool for talking to the audience. I don't like that. I don't like how he's treating them. And, I would be happy to talk to Cliff and Stuart, but, I hope I would get the chance to criticize them for their performance here. Not for the substance of their performance, but for their attitude and behavior and the way that they're treating the students here. This is disrespectful, and I really don't like it. I don't know what the people in the audience think. What do you think? I don't mean the people in the audience in the video I'm watching. I mean the people in this chat right now. Do you agree with me about this? Again, not that that makes his arguments right or wrong, but just the vibe he's giving me here is a pretty negative one.
Cool question. It's not a scientific question.
But I didn't answer science to any moral or ethical question.
You brought up science. I didn't. You brought it up.
Yes, I brought up science because you said that it was unlikely that chance is what created us and the universe and everything.
That's exactly right.
But that's not true. According
That's
to
not science.
That's not true.
That's not science at all.
The Big Bang Theory is the leading theory of why we're here.
And what do you think the Big Bang Theory tells you? That there's a beginning, which means there's got to be a cause. There's got to be some type of creator. And that's what
Yeah, Barney says, I agree. Supercritical Snake says it does feel overly theatric, like an amateur wrestling match. It does seem that way to me. See, they don't want to bring up science. I think the guy's a total jerk, and you're understanding it. Okay, fair enough. Captive Test says Cliff is a jerk. If you want to get a hold of them, and perhaps through MDD. What is MDD? They're on there a lot. Oh, is that modern day debate? Yeah. He's a preacher, so not surprising he's just preaching. His back turning has been annoying for me the whole time. Yeah, I guess I didn't comment on it until now, but I think if I were talking to him, I don't know if I would say so, but I'd certainly feel like I wasn't enjoying that. But I think it would have been nice if somebody said, hey, you're having a conversation with the person. Can you please face the person and engage with them and not engage with the audience? This is not a, like, if he wants to be a professional preacher, there are better ways of handling people than the way he's handling this person. There's no, by the way, isn't he supposed to be exemplifying like Christian humility? He comes off as extremely abrasive. I was going to say something more critical, but just, okay, I'll just be honest, kind of comes off as obnoxious here. Obnoxious, crude, aggressive. This is a very unpleasant, like, look at the screenshot, the way it's like what it's paused on currently. That doesn't give me the ring of Christian humility. I don't buy into this characterization of Christianity that Christians should always be meek and subservient and docile, because I don't think that's the vibe that Jesus gave. Jesus would get angry and so on. Jesus would get verbally aggressive and with people, but those people had to be doing something visibly wrong. This is a person disagreeing with him about an intellectual matter. It's not a reason to act this way. So it gives me a bad vibe. Again, bad vibes. My bad vibes about something. Who cares? It's not really that important. But I might as well report it.
Einstein had to struggle with. Oh no, Einstein says, I thought the universe was eternal. The Big Bang shows me it's not eternal, which means there's a beginning, which means there's got to be some type of creator. And that's
Wait, what? There's a beginning, so there's got to be a creator? Did Einstein ever say that?
exactly where Einstein went.
There was something before
Now, did you
that.
bring Einstein up?
You brought Einstein up.
Okay. The area of science.
All that explains is that we don't know what happened before that Big Bang. That's all that explains. That doesn't explain, oh, someone or something had to create. It just means we don't know what happened.
That there was something big enough, powerful enough, and outside of space and time to create something inside of space and time. So it's a philosophical. Wait. You stopped. Is that a question, or did you just pause?
No,
You want to keep talking?
if you believe in the Big Bang, then the concept of outside of space and time before the Big Bang, it's
Nothing. Is nothing something, or is nothing nothing? See, atheists have to say nothing is something to get around the argument to say, see, the universe.
Cool. That is it just me? Like the way it's like you have to say like that vibe. Like that would. I rarely comment on this sort of thing, but it's really off-putting for him to talk that way, waggling the finger around, moving that way. It really bothered me. Like I'm vicariously very bothered.
Universe has lasted forever. And so the best atheists that we argue with, the celebrity ones like Aaron Ra, Matt Delonte, they'll redefine nothing into something. But all the cosmologists know that actually there was a beginning. So there has to be a beginningless.
That's just not true. It's not true that every cosmologist thinks that there was like that the only thing that's ever existed was the visible universe since the Big Bang and that nothing came before it. I don't think that's true at all. I'm not saying that any particular view I think is correct or incorrect, but this idea that there's unanimity among cosmologists about this, which is what he seems to be implying here, not true.
creator, or at least something powerful, call it a computer, that started this thing, that was personal to make that decision.
the beginning
Sounds
of
a lot like God.
Of what we know to exist, what we as humanity knows to exist.
Science, that, yes, scientifically.
There was the beginning of that. We don't know if we're just some little tiny thing in a massive thing that already
began.
existed. We
That
don't
began.
know, but we have
Had a beginning. That's what
Will they let the guy finish a freaking sentence? My God, interrupting.
science points to. You keep saying science.
Science.
That's
science
the best
points to
cosmologists
that.
say that.
But how do you-
consensus? There's a consensus to that now, and that's why so many atheist, naturalistic cosmologists are depressed and they're on medication because they started to realize that they're ushering in some type of designer.
Are you shitting me? There's a consensus among cosmologists that the universe had a beginning. So now we've all got to face up to the fact that the universe had to have a creator. So that's why atheists are depressed and they're all on medication. I'm sorry. That's completely fucking silly. That's just silly. It's not true. It's also ridiculous. What a ridiculous thing for a person to say. That's ridiculous. Holy crap. Wow. That has to be one of the most, I think that, in fact, I'm going to say, I think that might be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard anybody say in any of the videos I've reviewed. Just, that is wild. Good Lord.
Even Richard Dawkins has admitted that. So what are you saying exactly? There's some point to...
I'm saying that...
What does this mean?
Before...
I'm seriously, I'm being honest. I'm not trying to poke her. I'm being honest. What does this mean?
All that we know is the extent of the universe that we have known to exist.
So I agree with the person talking right now. He's having trouble getting his points out, probably in part because he's being interrupted so much. But it looks like he's been having trouble expressing himself from the beginning of this debate. I don't know if he's like agitated from the way that they're talking to him or what, but yeah, I'm not seeing anything wrong with what he's saying here.
We haven't explored the whole universe. We don't know what exists. We don't know what's out there.
Agreed.
So we don't know how expansive it is. So all that we know is that before the Big Bang, nothing existed in the area that we know of.
So you are a scientist of the gaps. You were calling him a God of the gaps guy. You're a science of the gaps guy. Where you're saying, we have no idea yet, so let's just pause it. Science will figure it out sometime in the future. That's exactly what I...
Well, on inductive grounds, if we haven't figured it out yet, science will probably figure it out. Seems like a pretty reasonable thing to think.
just heard right there.
Well, it's better than saying, oh, well, it's just because some.
No, we're saying it makes sense that something that is beginningless,
from a human perspective,
timeless, personal to decide,
Man, it's been
all-powerful.
good talking with you. I can't thank you enough. You don't want to shake my hand? All right.
Because you're just a
Oh, you want wait?
professional
Quick response.
debater.
Quick,
I'm not a
quick
professional
response.
debater.
Quick response.
I'm an atheist. Are you an atheist?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm an
You're just
atheist.
a professional debate lord. You just come out here every day.
It's so
Professional debate lord?
it's tricky because it's all a belief system, right?
Sir, you stepped out and started talking, and you have every right to do that, and I thank you for doing
No
that.
one walking past you all the time.
Well, you feel free to walk past me. It's just fine. You can do that.
I think from what I was understanding, what you were saying, the question might be, and I wonder this too. Well, now I lost it a little bit. Are you saying that? And forgive me if I misquote.
Just speak out. Come on, let's go. Let's
Are
go.
you saying that love and emotion and feelings and goodness come from God? So essentially saying that me, who considers myself an atheist, would really be a Christian because I experience love and emotion for other people.
All right. I'm going to say this once, I hope.
Okay.
If you're an atheist, you have limited reality to matter and energy.
That's not true. Atheism does not entail that you're a materialist or a physicalist. It's just not true. I don't know why they think all atheists have to think that way.
Matter and energy, which means it is impossible to have a free will.
What he thinks, if you're an atheist, you have to think it's all matter and energy. And because you think it's all matter and energy, you can't have free will. Everything is wrong with that. Atheism does not entail that you think everything is matter and energy. Thinking everything is matter and energy does not entail that you think that there can't be free will. None of that is true. Just everything he's saying is wrong.
Because a free will means there is a me that goes beyond the complex chemical reactions in my brain.
Depends on the kind of free will. Does it entail that?
No God, no free will, because all I am is a complex chemical reaction, and you do not have a free will.
Yeah, so like if you're an atheist, you have to be some sort of like hardcore eliminativist, reductionist type of perspective where you either say all of certain sorts of higher level phenomena are reducible to these lower level phenomena, or even that the higher level phenomena don't exist. Who knows? No, you're not. Like, I actually do hold views like that, but you don't have to.
Coming out of a complex chemical reaction. Second point, my experience of life is I can be highly disrespectful to him, not choose to shake his hand, or I can choose to shake his hand after a very spirited debate, which I have no problem with, and I've never taken a debate course once, by the way, to straighten you out on me. Instead, I can be respectful or disrespectful.
Has he been respectful?
I don't have to do either. Which means my experience of reality is there's more to reality than matter and energy. There is a soul, a person, a me, a personhood that has a free will, the ability to love. What is love? It is not a sex drive. Love is not a chemical reaction. Love is a free decision to forgive the guy who stuck the knife in my back. And everything within me is saying, knock him into the next generation. And instead of doing that, I freely choose to forgive and to love. That is why he cannot live out what he's saying, and you cannot live out your atheism, because there's a deep part of you that says, no, I am free.
All right. That's it. All right. So that's it for the video. We got through it all. Hey, I got through a half-hour video in one video. It didn't take me five like episodes or like a season on the channel to do it. All right, so we got through it. Let's have a look at this poll. I did. Let's end the poll. And then where does that leave us? Okay, so you evil people didn't choose dieselism, which was clearly the best choice. Only got 5% of the vote. We have actually a tie. Uber realism and anti-Morianism, and Schmoogly Booglyism is out. So I guess we'll do a runoff poll where we will add 3 options. We're going to have Uber realism, we have anti-Morianism, and we have the truth. So new poll. Let's see what the true winner is. Okay. Cloud of Time says, "Are you okay?" Everyone doing okay after that? Yeah, everybody's okay. And yeah, just for the record, since I'm going to be moving again, I don't know what the setup is going to be like. I don't know. I'll try to do a similar setup, and I'll finally have the mic arm with the mic attached. Finally, and I can also tell you about the new computer I got. So I got all my new equipment. I can tell everybody about some of the new stuff. Still got to get a new camera, and I'll have to work on the lighting because I think the lighting for this video is a bit off. But we'll work on it. So we'll finally have a pretty decent setup. All right, let's see how the new poll is going. 14 votes. The truth is absolutely crushing it. So everyone keep going with the poll. Tony T3 says, I can't believe, like, we actually got through a video. I never do that. That's awesome. All right. So Tony T3 says, I can't believe Schmoogly Booglyism didn't win. I'm sorry. So as far as other content, so I got the TikTok videos I've been talking about for like, what, 8 months now. I did those back in like March and April. So I've been sitting on those for a long time. I'll just post them. I won't bother with timestamps. We'll just start getting them posted. I'll probably set them as premieres and do like one every other week for a couple months just to have some content. Maybe I'll do that like one or two a week, and then take a couple weeks off. I could do that. Maybe should I do that over the holidays? No. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll have to think about what I end up doing. I could probably use a little break from doing all these streams. End of the semester's coming up, so maybe a couple weeks off. I think it's a good idea. Maybe another week of this, and then a couple weeks off. And then I really dropped the ball on doing interviews and stuff like that. So I'll be contacting quite a few people to start setting things up for interviews and debates and stuff like that. I do have one in the works, but there's just one. Yeah. So we'll see. I'm happy to do other debates with realists and even other anti-realists who have different anti-realist views than me. So if you know error theorists, relativists, non-cognitivists, non-naturalist realists, naturalist realists, any of them, I'll debate everybody. Like, just to hell with it, I'll just debate everybody. So find anybody you want, tell me about them, I'll debate them. As long as the person doesn't seem like evil or insane or insufferable, I'm happy to have a discussion with them. All right. Supercritical Snake chose dieselism. That's the correct choice. All right. The truth just sounds too culty. Okay. How about surrealism? I don't want to call it that. Do you have a 4090? Are you talking about like a graphics card? Let me check what I have. I can't even remember. 1 second. I'll tell you in a second. 4070. Yeah. That's what I got. All right. Really enjoy a debate between you and James Fodor. I believe he's a moral naturalist. Yeah, actually, my first ever video appearance was a commentary on James Fodor. So what had happened is he had appeared on Bread of Life. I got really animated by his arguments for moral realism. I wrote a critique. I eventually posted that on my blog, I don't know, a year or two later. He did a follow-up video on realism sometime later. I did a post on that too. But James Fodor, we did have a debate. Wait, what am I talking about? We totally did have a debate. You can probably find that somewhere. So yeah, we did have a discussion. So that all of that has already happened. That's all in the past. I'm behind in the stream. So this is Alcatrace. I'm behind in the stream, but in honor of the crabs that devour their young, the anti-realist position should be called cancer. I'm not going to call it cancer. That's even worse for its PR. What are you talking about? Akil says, speaking of which, it'd be cool if you did videos on the dysfunction in academia. So I do have two that broach that topic. One is a discussion with Nick Brown about the state of psychology, and another is with Adam Mastriani about peer review. He's critical of peer review. So I have two. I'd love to do more. So I do have a few people in mind for bringing on the channel to talk about issues. It's a big concern of mine, but I haven't been super publicly like spokesperson-y about the particular issues. But I'm very critical of peer review. I think peer review, at least pre-publication mandatory universal peer review, as the sort of system of establishing credibility in science, I think has actually been detrimental. I don't even just think it's neutral. I think it's actively detrimental to the quality of science. A big reason why is that I think it creates a toxic incentive system predicated on Goodhart's law, where when a measure becomes the target, when a target becomes the measure, it ceases to be a good, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That's Goodhart's law. And the idea would be like, hey, you want to find out who's good at a thing, so you design a test to find out if they're good at the thing. People just start gaming everything so they get good at the test, and then it's no longer a good measure of whether they're good at the thing. So again, if a measure becomes the target, it ceases to be a good measure of whatever it's originally intended to be a target for. So peer review, and it has been roped into this academic publication system where career advancement is predicated on publishing papers. I think that centering everything on publishing papers in, quote unquote, high status journals creates an incentive system, which it's a kind of arms race. So, now you have like undergrads publishing papers and just publish. And career advancement and everything, when it's predicated on like citation count and H-index and all these other metrics, it stops us from using better holistic evaluations of the quality of people as instructors, as researchers, as mentors. There are more holistic and probably better ways of evaluating people than these standardized metrics. I'm not saying I'm necessarily against, like, I'm not saying everybody has to like, read tea leaves to find out if a person's a good researcher or teacher or not. But with the incentive structure that we have set up is a bad one. I think the peer review system has serious problems. It usually lacks transparency. And there's other problems with it. So, but again, I'm not against the general idea of peers reviewing one another's work. I think that's absolutely necessary and critical for science and the humanities. I'm specifically against the idea that we should have the current publication system roped in through peer review in the way that we do. Okay. So who won this last poll? We'll close this one out. Let's have a look. Okay, so the truth wins. So anti-realism's new name is officially the truth, which I guess that means realism is the untruth or something, or the lie. Let's call it the lie. So realism is called the lie, and anti-realism is called the truth. So which one do you endorse? Do you endorse the truth or the lie? I think most people are going to endorse the truth. Don't you think? Yeah, so if you name positions like that, things can get real silly real quick. All right, so there are other things I'd like to review and discuss, but I'm almost 3 hours. That's enough for today. But I'll mention a couple quick things. Let me find, where is it? Okay, this was a cool thing that somebody put together. I'll post this in the chat. Someone put together, it's called the Lance Bush Starter Pack, and they kind of put together a link post that covers some of my views on things. So check that out. I'll actually pin it. Go give it some love. I think that's kind of cool, especially if you're not familiar with my stuff. I got a bunch of comments on Substacks. Let me go have a look over there. And if you're not already familiar, I do have a Substack, and I could say at this point, please like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Check out I have a Linktree link. So Linktree is like just a link that takes you to all my links. So everywhere else that I am, you can go check that out. Leave comments on the video, do all the stuff, all the things. Please do all those things. So I'll say that now. I'm getting Cloud of Time says encore. I don't know, an encore. Oof, I could do a short one. What would I do it on? Yeah. Supercritical Snake says, you're a smart guy. Why would you believe in the lie? It's a good question. Why would anyone believe in the lie? And what else do we have? Oh, over on my blog, I did address something that came up in the humor dispute. I'll post a link to that. So, and that blog post is called, Can You Have an Intuition Without an Account of Meaning? And it addresses one of the concerns that came up in the humor discussion. And I ended up getting into some of my views about language there. I basically endorse a view of language that seems pretty darn similar to FCS Schiller's view of language. Schiller was a classical pragmatist whose views are more or less on par with William James. So Schiller has a view about language that I tend to endorse. Sometimes people will associate my views about language with Wittgenstein. I'm not really sure that I'm on board with Wittgenstein's views of language. Wittgenstein's a little hard for me to grok too. And whenever I see other people's interpretations, they seem to be different from one another. So I don't really, there are clearly some similarities, but my views seem increasingly to fall more in line with classical pragmatists. So there's the only two I could think of are James and Schiller. I'm sure there's more, and I just don't know enough about them. So, at some point, I'm going to have to get off the realist train or the meta ethics train and spend quite a bit of time digging into pragmatism and probably some cognitive science. And then I could come back and start talking, language cognition, there's a few other topics I really need to get into. Instead of reading a book here or there or an article, a couple articles a year, it's not enough. So I'm going to have to do a deep dive at some point and see where that takes me. As far as an encore, do you got any recommendations? I could do maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Like I could hit the 3-hour mark and shortly after that, but I don't know if I could do much else. So if you got recommendations, I'll go with them. Otherwise, we'll close this out today. I'll give everybody a little break and then I'll be back in a minute. And then we'll see about that. Okay. Be right back. All right, I'm back. Cloud of Time says, can you riff on why you're inclined towards pragmatism and what led you there? It's hard to say. So I could say a little bit about where I came at things. So when I was an undergrad, I kind of just chose courses randomly. I remember my first courses were anthropology, astronomy, criminology. I don't remember some of the others. I remember taking a statistics course. I don't even think I was required to. I don't know why I took statistics. I started taking some intro to philosophy courses. I remember taking a course, I think it was called, it was a literature course called, I think, Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, and absolutely loved it. We read some great stuff. We read some classics like The Hobbit, which I think I'd already read by that point. But that's where I read Sand Kings. It's a short story. Maybe it's a novella. I think those are a little longer. I don't know. From George R.R. Martin. For many years, I would say Sand King's my favorite science fiction horror story. And I didn't realize it was the same George R.R. Martin. So two of them lived in my head at the same time until I realized it's the same person. Like, Song of Ice and Fire guy, Game of Thrones. So same person. He wrote this really cool short story. It's cool because the main character is an absolute asshole, terrible person. And you read this and you're like, oh my God. But it's just well written and really cool. Anyway, so I just kind of took random courses. At some point, I was taking philosophy courses. I don't remember having a particularly well-developed view at the time. And I've given some of my intellectual background and educational background before. When I started college, I was really into the supernatural, the paranormal, and the conspiracies, not in the sense of being interested in why people believe them. I was into them. I believed all of that stuff. So, I thought that the moon was like an alien spacecraft and the crystal skulls had magic powers and, all this ridiculous stuff. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, I have something very distracting I have to deal with for a second. And at some point, I got into philosophy and psychology. I remember my first few courses, like not having intuitions in the way that other people did, or at least other people report having. I'm still very skeptical about that. And that's part of what got me interested. When I ended up applying to grad school, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into philosophy and psychology, and I ended up going to Tufts to do a terminal master's in philosophy. And it seemed like a good place to go. I had, Dan Dennett was there, people that took empirical approaches to philosophy. I would be in a region where I could be a research assistant in a lab. I did end up doing that. I was in the morality lab at Boston College. So I got to have both, 1 foot in psychology, 1 foot in philosophy. That was an absolutely great experience. Probably one of the best times of my life was the couple of years or 2.5 or so years I was in the area. That was awesome. I don't know why I got into pragmatism, why my views swung towards pragmatism. Here's the thing. I remember at the time one of the students said that, oh, I'm into American pragmatism. And I was like, okay, I didn't know anything about it. I never was particularly into pragmatism. And my views just kind of developed on their own. I never read a whole ton of philosophy. I read a lot more stuff in psychology. I read a lot of books on evolution. I read a lot of books on psychology. I read a lot of like science fiction. I read somewhat broadly when I did read philosophy in philosophy of mind, in a little bit of ethics stuff, but not. I wasn't like super into Wittgenstein and pragmatists, and I didn't even know that. Like I didn't even know that one of our professors, Avner Baz, was trying to revive ordinary language philosophy. I only found out later. At some point, I did get really interested in intuitions and philosophical methods. So I did do an independent study. I think it was called Intuitions and Philosophical Methodology, where I worked with someone else. We put together like our own syllabus. It's like we designed our course for ourselves, and we're like, hey, can you oversee this? And we did that course. So I have that. But pragmatism. So then I ended up doing a psychology PhD. I got really into the meta ethics stuff. That's a whole story. But as the PhD was winding down, I think a year or two before I finished, I ran into a pragmatist, and I would tell them about my views. And I have these very like sort of inchoate philosophical views on language and stuff. It's not like I ever spent a lot of time studying philosophy of language. So I was tell them about my views, and they kept saying, "Oh, well, that's exactly like Schiller. That's exactly like Schiller." And I would be skeptical of this because it's easy if you work on a particular person's thought, like David Hume. Someone could say you sound like just like Hume. You sound just like Hume. So whatever, take it with a grain of salt. But they were like, no, you don't understand. You sound exactly like him, like even dispositionally. So they would show me these quotes from Schiller, and I'd be like, holy shit, yeah, that sounds just like me. And then I'd see another one, and I'm like, that sounds just like me too. So I'm like, what is going on with Schiller? And so I ended up speaking with this person. They specialize in Schiller. So that got me into looking into William James. I finished James on pragmatism, and I'm still working on the meaning of truth. And I've read a little bit of tidbits of Schiller. I haven't done a sustained reading of Schiller's like books, any of them all the way through. But I've read like portions of Logic for Use and some other portions of the texts. I really need to sit down and read a lot more Schiller. And I've had like really long discussions about Schiller's views. And so I see a lot of resonances there, but it's really something I'm going to have to stop and really dig through the corpus of his work to see where I would agree and disagree. But there do seem to be a lot of resonances there. And, over time, especially from talking to this pragmatist friend, my views, it started to become apparent that I'm kind of like a native pragmatist. Like my philosophical disposition is pragmatically inclined, and I hadn't been aware of that. And so the more I learn about pragmatism, the more I'm like, it has this vibe of, oh, that's kind of what I thought all along, or oh, that's different, but it seems like I can make that fit with my views, and it seems to comport nicely with how I'm disposed to think. And so whether it's that's how it was all along kind of perspective, it's especially that's how it was all along in terms of the pragmatic critique of other views in philosophy. Those I almost always resonate with. As far as the substantive content of pragmatism, that wasn't an immediate sell for me, but it's a direction that I've been moving in for a while now. So as for why, looks like that's just my natural disposition. I don't know why that's my disposition though. But yeah, I just, for whatever reason, I'm inclined towards pragmatism. Okay, so I think that's going to have to. I see other people asking questions. Throw them in the comments. I said encore, but I don't think I could handle too much more. So Zachman, ask another time. All right, about the problem of the criterion. You could maybe throw it in the AMA video, which I'll probably get to that after, like during Christmas break, because it's just I'm too busy to really sit down and do that whole video, because it's probably going to be like 5 hours. KB can give 3-minute responses. I can't. So maybe it'll be more than 5 hours. Maybe it'll be ridiculous and I'll have 3 parts of it. So throw that in the AMA, because I'd like to address a broader range of questions people are interested in me addressing, but not after a 3-hour stream where I'll say something totally stupid and incoherent. Okay, cool. So Zachman said, sure. Great. And then Barney makes a recommendation. Dewey's Reconstruction in Philosophy is a good intro to pragmatist metaphilosophy. Maybe I should check it out. Mind Onion says, could such a disposition be culturally dependent, like pragmatism is associated with the USA? And I think you're American. Yeah. it's not obvious I'm from the United States. So yeah, I'm American. I don't know. It doesn't have to be that because I'm American, that makes me be into an American philosophy, because pragmatism is often considered like the only homegrown American philosophy. It could be that it's a common cause, like whatever cultural factors gave rise to classical pragmatism also gave rise to me. Maybe, I don't know. If that's the case, though, why are these views not super popular in America? You know, and they're not among philosophers. Barney says Dewey also wrote a lot about metaethics. All right, there's lots of great comments here, but I can feel my brain just sort of shriveling up. I'm gonna have to close it out there, everybody. Thanks, everybody. This was one of my favorite streams too. It was off to a little bit of a rough start. I was stumbling over my words, but we got there, and it'll actually be under 3 hours, which is remarkable. So we made it to the end. Thanks, everybody, for being here. This was a blast for me. You'll be seeing me in a different setup. If not in the next video, then a video or two after that. We'll see how that goes. And hopefully the setup will continue to improve. Okay. So that being said, I will say goodnight to everybody. Please leave comments in the comment section, share, like, all the things. And I will see y'all later. Take care.